Remy, this is what people do in Liverpool now that the pubs are closed. But less Brera, you're gonna have to come and listen to some Torah.
Oh, I didn't know the sound is working.
Okay.
It's not a kleinigkeit. People want to go out to Fabreng and say L'chaim.
It's definitely it's you. I'm saying I don't know how you're gonna Fabreng. This is nicht kein kleiner Meister.
This all starts because Yidden didn't want to celebrate Simchas Torah wie es darf zu sein.
Yeah. I agree.
So everything happens from that.
But you notice that in Manchester it was okay. There's no Gzeira in Manchester. It's only in Liverpool. I'm not pointing the fingers at you, Rami, Chas v'Shalom, for not celebrating Good Dubai.
It's very simple. No, Dortmund, where there's most Fabrengen, that's where the Gzeira is most. The Sutton doesn't care about Manchester because what happens there already? It's too viel Fabrengen, doch nicht Dortmund. No?
Aye. And a very good schmack of Torah.
I wish I could say the same.
Where were you stuck at home?
Yeah. Well, at Shvini Atzeres at home. Simchas Torah in Shul.
Well, you just the what's it called went around.
And then one of the Chachamim from the executive, the Shul executives. There's a reason why the Shul executives, they are the ones that are the executives.
Oh, for sure.
Part of the Neflois HaBeira. How the Eibishter can make such Meshugana people, such stupid people. Only the Eibishter can create such stupidity.
What's his name? Yes, someone was telling me that one of the executives on his shul.
1 second, we're on YouTube and we're being recorded forevermore. So we.
I know that's why I'm not mentioning any names. And I was talking to somebody who was saying that one of the executives on his board said that he prefers prefer any day 2 Yom Kippurs to 1 Simchas Torah.
Yeah. This is the Am Chochem V'Novin. This is the chosen people.
Okay, I'm going to take a sefer and put myself on mute.
Oh, Rabbi Cohen is back. You were frozen, Moshe David.
Yeah, hopefully after Simchas Torah, I don't want to be frozen. You're supposed to be warm. There's a famous story. You're
living in Manchester, yeah.
I'm out from 770. You know, no such thing as getting a cold. Okay, officially we're supposed to start with the Dvar Malchus. So I'm going to try and share a video from old Living Torah video from an interview with Beckerman about unpacking your bags. If it doesn't work, then you'll have to try something else. See if it works. That's not really working. I'm not much to do over here. Okay, fine. Anyways, I'll just share maybe a vart, interesting vart that I found when I was teaching my class before Shoshana. I think it's a chidush in the Rebbe's Torah, and you can all debate it. Basically, we do Inyan Golem Mashiach every day with our class. And this year is Rosh Hashanah Shechol B'Shabbos. It was Rosh Hashanah Shechol B'Shabbos, and it was also the first day of Sukkot that fell on Shabbos. So it's famous that the Mikdash you take in on Shabbos, and the Medina they didn't blow the shofar. So we were speculating in our class what's going to happen, and Mashiach is going to come. This was before Rosh Hashanah, and what we're going to do this year is, are we going to blow the shofar on Shabbos or not? Is it going to be the same as all the previous years? That was the discussion in the class. So some boys brought up the fact that we'll probably be in the Beis Hamikdash. If Mashiach is going to come, we're going to be in the Beis Hamikdash. So we'll hear the shofar in the Beis Hamikdash. That was the general gist of what we decided. We decided before Rosh Hashanah that we're going to be in the Beis Hamikdash and we'll hear the shofar on Shabbos. And so all these irrelevant halachas about not blowing the shofar on Shabbos wasn't going to be relevant for Tashon Pei Aleph. Unfortunately, it was relevant for Tashon Pei Aleph. But then later I learned a mimer after we discussed this. I learned a mimer Yom Rosh Hashanah Tashon Mem Gimel. And at the end of the mimer, the Rebbe says something very fascinating. The Rebbe says over there, so the Rebbe is giving all the Rebbe is saying bring it down to the Geula. So then the last three lines of the Maimer, the Rebbe says, "V'rachas kama kama Shia Melech Yisrael megoyalei begula mitzvah Hashem adei Mashiach she'az yisku gam b'yom Shoshana shecholis b'Shabbos beis Hamikdash b'Yavne." That's what it says in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that the Rebbe Mazaka was misakin that even after the Churban Beis Hamikdash you can blow the shofar on Shabbos anywhere where there's a base, where there's a basin. in. What type of basin? But so it was in the Beis Hamikdash, and even after the Churban, also anywhere where there was a Sanhedrin, or at least maybe even any basin, which is a kavua, which is. Then the Rebbe says like this: "Ve'yishlema the gam bechol makom u'makom." In every single place we'll blow the shofar on Shabbos when the Gula comes. Ki az yispatlu kala inyanim the gezeres, in brackets. Rebbe points out there, it says, then all the inyanim of gezeres are going to be bottom. So all this whole gezerah of Rabbah, that maybe someone's going to carry Dalad Amas Rishus Rabbim because he's going to blow the shofar, is going to be bottom. And so we're going to be able to blow the shofar in any place. That's what the Rebbe says in the B'mheira Yemenu of Mamash of Simcha Gedela. It's like within the space of that line, the Rebbe says that it seems like all inyanim and gezeres are going to be bottom.
There you go, Avrami. You can have a Simchas Torah on Agbalos.
To work. It seems like not only the gezerah of about. So Be'ezus Hashem, all the gezeres, maybe some people will be looking forward to the gezerah of not more than 4, maybe will be bottle. All the inyanim gezeres will be bottle. So
England is not more than 6, the Prime Minister said.
Not more than 6.
But just to be object to what you just said, I saw before Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe says there's a klotz kasha, that normally one of the reasons we don't blow shofar on Erev Rosh Hashanah is to be mechalik between the shofar the Rabbanon, the Minig, and shofar the Reise.
Yeah.
But the Rosh Hashanah Shabbos, we're not blowing shofar on Shabbos. So why shouldn't, it's not that reason, why don't we blow on Friday? So the Rebbe says, because Mashiach can doch come in Erev Rosh Hashanah, and then we would blow on Shabbos.
There you go. It's a real thing.
We don't blow even on Friday, Erev Rosh Hashanah, which is only Chav Ches Elul.
Yeah. There's another fascinating sikha where the Rebbe, they showed it once in the Torah. They said the Rebbe points out, it goes through in detail. How is the Avodah able to start within one day of Mashiach coming? The Avodah will start right away. And the Rebbe says over there that the Beis Hamikdash is going to come down with the big day kahuna, and everything's going to come down. And it's all going to be, all these things are going to work right away. We're able to start the Avodah right away.
You need 7 days for the Paraduma, the Ekber, the Tumah. Yeah.
Anyways, that's so. Hashem, it should be.
Avrami, don't worry. He'll answer that too.
We're all waiting for that final moment. So we have today. We're officially going to go soon to Rav Raskin. Rav Raskin is from Petach Tikva. He writes the weekly column in the weekly Farbrengen, the Halacha column, which I think over the past few years actually interesting was one of his columns was a debate, was a topic of the Kinus Torah for a few times. I think actually interesting. We debated his things about I think preparing for one day of Yom Tov, taking something out of the freezer, or like a few days. But there's so Rav Raskin has agreed to speak for us, and we're just waiting a few minutes. There's a few people. I think a few people are just joining only now. So originally we posted that he's going to speak about Dinei Mamonos, but then he notified us that he's going to speak about an interesting topic of Lashon Hara and Shidduchim. How much are you allowed to say the truth about when it comes to Shidduchim, what together of Lashon Hara. Also, just another before we start, Rabbi Yossi Shmukler, my brother-in-law, he told me, asked me to say that he was thought he'd be able to prepare something. He's not 100% sure he can prepare something which is Chaticha Royal is Chaved, the proper, which is worthy of being Chazer Ma'akinas Torah. So he asked to be moved to the end, and hopefully by then we'll have something put together. So if it doesn't work out, he asked Mechila, and hopefully, so the Seder is going to be officially We're going to have Rabbi Raskin, and then after that is Dr. Lowenthal, Professor Lowenthal is going to speak, and then afterwards Rabbi Yisrael David is going to, Yisrael David Klein is going to speak, and then we'll see if Rabbi Yosef Shmulevitz is going to speak. So I'm going to hand it over to Rav Raskin, the Chavod.
Okay, good evening. Hope you hear me well. Regarding Lashon Hara and Shidduchim, Mr. Shem, that'll be the topic of tonight. B'chlal, we know that the great mitzvah of making a shidduch and how it's brought down, that from creation, that's what Hashem is busy doing the whole time, Mizavig Zivugim. And this also brings to us many questions which come up. Because on one hand, we all know of the Isser of Lashon Hara. The one is not allowed to say anything bad, negative about someone else. One of the interesting things is that in the Sefer HaChinuch, we follow the order of the mitzvahs in Sefer HaChinuch. Mitzvah Reish Lamed Vav is the mitzvah which tells us that you're not allowed to speak Lashon Hara, and over there, famous things which we say, that Lashon Hara affects all three, affects the one who says it, affects the one who hears it, affects the one who's spoken about, and it's a lav, etc. I don't need to be ma'arich about these bewusst inyanim. On the other hand, the mitzvah Reish Lamed Zayin, the mitzvah right after the mitzvah of Lashon Hara, following mitzvah, Reish Lamed Zayin, is the mitzvah of Leisamid Adam Re'echa. What does it mean, Leisamid Adam Re'echa? Leisamid Adam Re'echa, the Sefer Chinuch tells us that when you not only don't stand before the blood of someone else, that when you're standing there and you see something which is happening, which can affect, which is negative, having a negative effect on someone else, do not stand on the side. Examples which he brings there is one who knows testimony for someone else, not to stay on the side and to hold back their testimony. On the contrary, one is obligated for to give the testimony that someone owes someone money or any other type of thing. Anytime when someone's able to help someone and they're obligated to not let their blood spill, with this in mind, we now see we have two mitzvahs, which obviously they're both mitzvahs from Hashem. And God forbid to say that they are a contradiction one to another. There's one hand, there's a mitzvah of Leisamid Adam Re'echa. On the other hand, there's a mitzvah of Lashon Hara. And this is the mitzvah which we're going to discuss, how these two things fit together and chas v'shalom, not a stira one with another. Start with a few, the silas which we know, they're all very common questions which come up when someone is asked about a shidduch, and they find out something, they know something, and their question is, am I to give over this information, or am I not to give over this information? And we're talking about right now, at this current stage of the share, it's information which is serious, which is important, which will definitely have a strong impact and influence on the future married life. The Chalkas Yaakov has a tshuva where he was asked by a doctor, that the doctor tells him that there's a bacher who was who we know, the doctor checked him, and the doctor knows that this bacher has a very, very intense form of yanamachla. And at the same time, right now, the chassan this bacher does not know, and he's about to close the shidduch. The doctor's question is, am I allowed to, or am I supposed to, or am I not allowed to give over this information? I see the shidduch about to be closed, and I know this information that this bacher has this form of yanamachla. and according to nature, he's not going to live for more than 2 years. Am I supposed to give it over or not? The Chalkas Yaakov in his Tshuva writes that as a mitzvah of leisamad adam re'echa, when someone sees someone drowning in the sea or an animal attacking him, or someone hears that someone is planning or plotting to hurt him, one is obligated to go ahead and save him. That is a complete obligation, and not to let him, God forbid, fall in. And one who does not do that is and he also quotes from the Chafetz Chaim, which the Chafetz Chaim writes that even Leisamad Adam Recha is not only, as we've already said, not only when you see someone actually being killed or being injured, but one who sees one who is about to incur a monetary loss. Leisamad Adam Recha is there also to stand there and to help him and not let him fall through. And with this in mind, he says that this doctor is obligated to give over the information and not to hold it back because of the Leisamad Adam Recha. Similar, but a less severe, maybe less severe in a certain sense, but for our not less severe, the Tzitz Eliezer Vadmei, one of the prominent poskim in Yerushalayim in the previous generation, also he deals with the shaila where the story over there was where a chassan or a kala were not able to have children. One was kala, she did not have a womb or echem, or the chassan wasn't able to have children. And the question was someone who knows about this and knows that the shidduch is about to be closed, is he obligated to give over this information? Is he mechuyev to give over the information, knowing that this is what this couple will not be able to have children? And again, the Tzitz Eliezer paskins that one has a full obligation to give over this information, and one who knows about it. And if one does not do it, he's being over on the Isser of Leisamad Adam Recha. And he quotes from the Sefer Pischei Tshuva. The Sefer Pischei Tshuva writes in Siman Archaim Siman Kuf Nun Vav that there's a big pella that the Isser of Lashon Hara everyone is very careful about. Everyone's careful not to be over on the Lashon Hara. And everyone makes a whole big shturm and task about the Isser of Lashon Hara. But when it comes to the Isser of Leisamad Adam Recha, all of a sudden everyone falls to the side and everyone's quiet. And people see that other people could be hurt, could be hurt from monetary ways or other ways, and people are not speaking up to save them from someone who's about to cheat them or to fool them. That's what the Pischei Tshuva writes. So he says, definitely, when it comes to the shidduch, and it's a situation where if the shidduch is going to go through, there's going to be a problem which is going to affect the entire married life, one definitely has the obligation to go ahead and to give over this information. Now, he does add an interesting point, important point, which we find also, if I'm not mistaken, also in letters of the Rebbe, that when things are not clear, it is always important to go and be misayetz with a Rav, with a Chacham, with someone who has Havana, and to see what is something which requires to be given over. Because not always is our judgment proper, and it's important to have a professional judgment. There's a certain Maggid Shir in the yeshiva who I spoke to him, and he told me a lot of times he had his talmid and people contact him, call him, and he whenever he knows his talmidim, and he knows the ones who are problematic, and when they come to the shidduchim age, he writes before, goes to a Rav and says, this is the student, obviously without the name, but this is the problem, and am I obligated to say it or not? And and if yes, how am I supposed to say it? That is a very important way of how one could be certain that they are doing what is right. Interesting enough, to in the similar a similar idea, slightly different, but a similar idea. There is, I don't know what the law in England is, but there's in certain countries there's a law that someone who Rahman al-Islam has epilepsy is not allowed to have a driver's license. In America, many of the states, that's the law. And now, so one's not allowed, one of those epilepsy is not allowed to have a driver's license. So as a tshuva, someone asked Rav Ovadia Yosef that he knows about someone who has epilepsy. It also depends. When I've seen the law, it depends. In some places, it's like 5 years since the last attack, or however it is. So someone asked Rav Ovadia Yosef, what she asked him was that he knows about someone who has epilepsy and has attacks, and somewhere or another got a driver's license, which is a sakana. And his question is he mechuyev to call the Department of Motor Vehicles and inform them that so-and-so took out a license in a cheating way, in a non-honest way, which is putting himself in sakana and other people in sakana. And is in tshuva, Nichavadas, he paskins clearly, yes. One is obligated to report to the Department of Motor Vehicles in order to protect other people and this person and other people from car accidents, from nezik, ben nefesh or berchush. So we find again and again and again this same point, that there is an isser of a samad adam be'echa, that when something could cause a true damage and a true harm, one has the obligation to go over and to give over this information in order to protect, and this is a mitzvah of a samad adam be'echa. I'm sure many people here have heard such stories. I went through my years of being a bachor, afterwards I've heard stories of couples which were never meant to have gotten married, and it could have been one of the sides which was not able to be married, and friends knew about it and still didn't say anything, and they got married, they got divorced, and only disaster came out of it. Many of us have seen such, I'm sure everyone has seen such situations, and the results, we've seen them. That just goes on just to show us in front of our eyes how we've seen these things happen. And if we look into Torah clearly gives us a clear hachra that such things one is obligated to give over such information. True, certain such times one has to be very careful of how they give it over, as there's many. Let's say one as a doctor there's legally will be sued if he gives over information which he's not allowed to, and he has to again be misyaitz how he could do it in a way which is halachically okay, and that won't affect his profession, etc. But mitzad over here, we're discussing the etzim halacha. Mitzad etzim halacha, there is definitely an obligation to give over such information in order to bring out, to help and save someone. Like I mentioned, when one has a subject, the Rebbe writes in letters to give over and to consult with the Rav to see what should be said and how it should be said. But now we'll move on to even lesser of issues, lesser problems. We're not talking problems which are going to ruin the marriage but problems which exist. Every person has different types of issues, and every person has different types of things. And could be the person is clean, could be the person is messy, could be the person has different attitudes. So the question is, when we come to such things, how to give over such information. The story of someone who came once to Shmuel Zavsky and asked him about a bacher. Asked him, is a bacher alamdim? He said, yes. Says a bacher good head? Yes. Says he shteik? Is it learned? Yes. Very good. The father is all happy. As he's leaving the room, Shmuel Zavsky turns to him and asks him, can I ask you a question? He said, yes, sure. How come you didn't ask me about this bacher Does he clean up his plate off the table after he's done eating? How come he didn't ask me if the cook doesn't make such good food, if he still compliments the cook or he gives him attitude? How come he didn't ask me such questions? Who said that's any less important for your daughter than how he understands Pshat and Tosfos? That was the shayla which she asked the father. Now we many times we receive questions on all types of things, and the question is, what should we give over? What should we not give over? What is important to give over? What is not important to give over? Now, Chavetz Chaim writes that when someone is giving over information for a te'elis, for a purpose, in other words, one is giving over information, not stam talking, but there's a purpose here. There's a purpose in order to help a shidduch. There's a purpose in order that something productive should come out of it. Then it is allowed, with a few restrictions. In the Sefer, he writes a bunch of restrictions, but the general idea is that there's lashon hara, stam gossip is forbidden. But the same in pieces of information, if it's being spoken for a purpose, for a tachlis, then it is allowed. Now, but there are a few conditions, and I'll try to go over at least most of them. Number one is not to exaggerate, meaning someone asks a question, give an answer to the question, precise, mitzamtzim on the words, and give over that thing without going on for extra elaborating and discussing. More than that, not to exaggerate. We know in everything, everything could be said in two ways. Everything could be said to minimize the problem or maximize it. I mean, to give examples, is it that you can't walk into the room because it's so dirty, or he's not the most orderly person, or is it a disaster, or is he just quiet, as we say in Hebrew, quiet like a fish, or just he's more of a quieter person, not the loudest person in the room. There's always different ways of how to give it over. The point is always, as he says there, to give it over in the minimal way, not to exaggerate and to elaborate on it. Another point, which the Achronim say, is not, if there's a chisaron, not to say it twice. A chisaron should only be said one time. Why should a chisaron only be said one time, not twice? Because if you say a chisaron twice, you're actually inherently teaching the other side that this is a problem. Who said it was your job to teach them that this is a problem? Maybe they don't know that it's a problem, b'chlal. People don't know it's a problem, it doesn't bother them. You don't have to be mechanech them. By the way, you should know that when a bacher does so-and-so, or when a girl does so-and-so, that shows on a problem. Right? They get betin. Who asked you to tell them what problems are? You could tell them, maybe as far as they're concerned, if someone wakes up 10 o'clock, they're okay. You have to say, no, someone wakes up 10 o'clock, that's a problem. If they don't find it to be a problem, you're not allowed to tell them that is a problem, to educate them that is a problem. Another important thing, which goes beyond everything, is any piece of information which one gives over, one must be certain that this is the case. One must be certain that this is true. A friend of mine told me that when he was in yeshiva, there was something in the dorm that he used to take vitamins or food supplements. And then when that bacher was in shidduchim, one of the other people in the room, in the dormitory, gave over to one of the sides that he heard that he thinks that this bacher takes pills, emotional pills, or whatever it is. And the shidduch almost broke off until they were fire and they found out that it was only vitamins, etc. One of the people in the room of the dorm of that told me that. And he told me, Baruch Hashem, they were fire and everything is okay and they're happily married and children, etc. But that just goes on to show how one has to be so careful, because you could be you think something you don't know about, and it looks like something's happening there, and you have no idea what it really means. And if you don't know what it really means, you have no authorization at all to give this over. Another important point, which the Achronim point out, is sometimes you have the ability, sometimes especially if someone who is a authority, shpia, rav, or someone who is a close friend, could tell them, listen, I know your son, I know your daughter, I know this bacher, and it's not a match. It's not going to work. Trust me, rely on me, let go. And they'll be makabel it from you. If you're able to say that without explaining why, it's definitely much better. If the only way they'll accept it is if they know why, then you're allowed to say it. But if you're able to tell them, don't do it, I'm telling you don't do it, then that is sufficient. I myself remember a certain situation where I was able to tell one of the sides, don't go for it, it's not for you. And there was a lot of information which I knew, and I did not give it over, and I did not need to give it over because we was able to get them with much lower level of information giving over to them to get them to let go of the shidduch. So many times you don't have to spill all the beans, give over all the lashon hara and everything. Very small amount of information, and that will be enough to take it off. And then you saved you. There's no reason to say the extra lashon hara. Another important point is that whenever, as we mentioned, this is only for a te'elis, for a purpose. If giving over this information, there's no te'elis anymore, then it should not be done, and it's an issur of lashon hara. When's there no te'elis? Let's say the shidduch was already closed. Mazel tov, Baruch Hashem, they're happily engaged. So if it's a problem, like I mentioned in the first part of the share, something which is Chman al-Itzlan, and who knows what's going to be out of it, then there's a mitzvah to say it. But let's say after they made the shidduch, you're going to go and say, by the way, you should know this chassan is a messy guy. What's the point? No one's going to break a shidduch when they hear that the chassan's a messy guy. It's only extra lashon hara, extra rechilus, and there's no reason to give over such different information or anything else of the sort. The Gemara tells us, Yishabech es mikchoy, that you're supposed to be make mishabech, Yishabech es mikchoy. To go then and say something negative, it's mamish and issur of lashon hara. Could be if 3 days ago they would have called you before the shidduch was closed and asked you, then you would have been obligated to say this information. But as they did not ask you then, and now the shidduch already happened, now they're asking you, there's no reason, there's no right to give over this information as the shidduch is already been set. That's it. There's no reason to give over this information. Now, it's brought down in the name of Rabbi Vosner that one doesn't need to always answer the questions to every person. I'm not a phone company. I don't just give out information. It's not my business. One is allowed to say, I don't know them. I don't know them close. I don't have information. Go ask someone else. And I really don't know. I have nothing to tell you about them. One is not obligated to go over every person and give over all the information, especially in situations where one is uncertain and one doesn't have a valid piece of information. But this is also when, let's say in yeshiva, for example, so some people are closer to people, some people are further, and not necessarily knowing how close and how far is one person. So then they're allowed to say, I don't know, and that's it. But let's say, for example, the bacher is magid shir, the bracha is chavrusa. What are you saying? I don't know, it's too far, I'm close. What do you mean you don't know? Of course you know. Then there's a problem. We're talking, then there's an obligation. But when someone's from distance, from the Vaitans, they don't have the obligation to give over this, and it's not, and that's okay. But again, if they like to give, like sometimes people give a half a thing, and they don't give this only the good things and the bad things they don't say, and they say look for it. So the person says, okay, well they've said so much things, that means they do know them. What else is missing? So again, there's a problem there, because once you give over, you have to give over the whole thing. If you say nothing, you say nothing. But if you give over, then you can't just say, I gave over all the good information, besides that, I don't know. So what are you saying? And then people say, okay, that's good enough for me, and that's it. And then you fool them into doing something which is wrong for them to do. Now, there is the pasuk tells us, M'bsarcha al tisalim. M'bsarcha al tisalim teaches us that one is allowed to give extra information, extra advice to family members. M'bsarcha al tisalim. So although in this previous category, in general information which is asked, the approach is that what's asked you're allowed to answer, but not to give over like extra information. There's no heter for that. What's asked is one's allowed to give over. However, Sarchat Tis'am teaches us that for one's close relatives, one is allowed to be slightly more proactive and give over more information to them to help them out, as the pasuk tells us in Sarchat Tis'am. One interesting thing which I found over here, pasuk can tell us, is this is one of the common things which people like to do, is they like to compare two bachrim, or two girls, and they approach one. How is him versus him? Let's compare the two. And the pasuk can tell us that this has a problem of lashon hara. That comparing two people is a problem of lashon hara. I can discuss each person on his own merits and his own rights, but putting two people versus each other, that's already getting more into, it's extra getting involved in between them, and there that already falls in the Achronim right, that falls into the category of lashon hara. So one should be careful about that. Again, when looking into person, one is to be careful who they're asking. People have enemies, and one goes and asks an enemy that causes that the person saying negative, not in order to help, they're saying negative because they don't like them. So then again, they're not doing it to help the shidduch. They're saying bad because they don't like them. There again, that there's a problem there of an isser of lashon hara, and that is agav why it is very important when you call someone and ask them a shayla about shidduchim to start off the conversation and say, "I'm calling regarding shidduchim." That way, when the person answers, they don't fall in and by mistake talk lashon hara. No, it's the same answer, but if they say it's stam, it's lashon hara. If you tell them that you're calling them for shidduchim purposes, then it is allowed because they're calling them for the purpose in order to help. As it's important that you say that you start the conversation saying, "I'm calling you for shidduchim purposes." In addition to all of this, which is, I believe, gone through many of the details, there is the additional point of what one is obligated to say about themselves. Now, certain things the roommates know, the mashpim know, the magadishir know, their friends know. But then the question is when no one knows, no one said anything, and the person knows about himself certain chesroinus, his own chesroinus. Is he obligated to give them over or not? The Gemara tells us that teaches us that one is supposed to see, the chassan is supposed to see the kala before they get married. Why? Because if not, then he's going to end up hating her. Why? Because all of a sudden certain things are going to come. I say, "You didn't know about this? You fooled me? How can you done such a thing to me?" And it will cause the hepech of Avos Yisrael. So part of the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael, the Gemara tells us in Kedushin, is that the chassan is supposed to actually see the kala. The Beis Shmuel tells us that a woman who knows that she has a mum and she did not give it over to her husband before, she did not inform him, she did something improper. The Beis Meir, who was a Baal Plukta of Rebbe Akiva Eiger, he writes, Beis Meir writes, that how do I know what is a mum? How do I know what is a problem? So he says, we look at the country in that time. What the people in that place, they look at that as a mum, as a problem, which when it comes to a sale, they'll return the object because it's imperfect. That is considered a mum, and that one is obligated to therefore tell over and give over to the other side and tell them, yes, this is a problem, and I want you to know that I have this problem. This isn't anything. This is number one, the shilas of dine amaminus, selling an object. But the same thing is, like we mentioned before, Shmuel says when a person knows that they personally have an issue, they are obligated to give over about this issue before they close the shidduch. Now, obviously, every country, every place, What could be a problem in Eretz Yisrael is not necessarily in England. What's in England is not in America. Each place has them in Hagim of the Makim, what is considered important and what is not. And obviously every single cry is what's by Chassidim, is not by literature. Each place has its issues. But what in that place, in that circles is considered an issue, if one does not give over that information, that is a mum. And that, as we'll see in a moment, can even, first of all, is the issue of Haftarech Kamoicha. Second of all, could even lead to a shayla of Mekach Tos. Could even lead to a shayla of Kedushay Tos. Even going back earlier, the Sefer Chassidim writes that one who has a illness or etc. and is going to get married, one is obligated to give it over to the other side. In a letter, the Rebbe refers to this, which obviously one of the problems in this shayla is that people don't feel always comfortable to give over. I'm not going to go like before a person got engaged, or before it's like going in shidduchim. I'm just going to go right all about themselves, what all the chesronis are to inform the whole world. Say, I don't feel comfortable to inform my chesronis to the whole world. What should I do? So the letter of the Rebbe writes that first one should go out on the first date, and then afterwards, and they see there's already some sort of connection, then the Rebbe says, then they can continue and give over the information. In other words, they'll do it after they've already met and seen that there is reason to continue, then give over the information of the chesan which they have. That's what Rebbe writes in the letter. Now, in these types of things, what one has to give over. So again, as we mentioned, it's things which are considered a moment in that time. It's interesting, the tshuva from Rabbi Yashiv, that someone who does not have hair and wears a wig instead is obligated to give it over to the other side to tell that he has this chesaron. No, another answer he writes is something which is very minimal, and people do not consider it a problem. For example, we all do yesharim. Right? Why? That shows that if one side is a carrier of, let's say, sex, they could still get married. We don't. Other people, they do is each one takes a test on their own. We don't do that, and we're only concerned if both sides are carriers. So if Yashiv was asked, if someone knows that he is a carrier, is he obligated to give that over? And he said, he's not obligated to give that over because in our circles, we do not consider that a chesaron. Though, if in circles which will consider that a chesaron, one will be obligated, yes, to give that over as well. One of the interesting shilas is about halachic issues. When one has a halachic problem, are they obligated to inform the other side as well? So on one hand, the first common sense is that that's a problem as well. Though we have interesting discussion in the Gemara, I'm not going to be so much, I'm going to be katzer in it, but it's an interesting opening for a lot of discussion. We have in the Gemara, we have someone who marries a guy, marries a Jewish woman. So the shaila is, what is the halachic status of the child? We all know, the child is a yid. It's not so clear the child is a yid. In the Gemara, we have three opinions. One opinion in the Gemara in Yevamis is that the child is a guy. One opinion is that the child is a mamzer. Third opinion is that the child is a yid. And even in the opinion that the child is a yid, there are many poskim which hold that the child is not allowed to marry a kohen. And there's discussions of chatchila, b'diavad, if they can marry a kohen or not. And it's also one of the common problems today, that we have one mikuravim, which the father is a guy, and then the child wants to marry a kohen, and that again, this problem falls in. But in the Gemara tells us that Rav Yehuda says that the child is a yid, but then Rav Yehuda tells a certain such child, what should you do? You want to either you marry another child of a ger, or go disappear, go hide to a place where people will not know who you are from, who you are, what's your origin. Tell them you're a yid, and you'll marry there. And the Rabbi also says, "I gali, I nasiv bas minach," or go to Galus, or you'll have to marry someone on the same parameter as you. So this brings a big shaila. What's this hira to go hide, disappear, and then you could marry a regular yid? I mean, basically, we're understanding that the child of this guy his mother is Jewish, is a pagam. So he's telling you, go hide, don't tell anyone about your problem. 1 second, how can you go hide and not tell them about your problem? Isn't this a real chesaron? Someone to find out about it? Wouldn't they be bothered? And Poskim are really bothered about this Gemara. Zalman discusses it, other discusses it, and there's a few approaches of how to look at this Gemara. One of the approaches is that it's only by a pagam. The pagamim which we discussed were only physical problems, health issues, but a pagam of yichus is not a problem. That's one of the approaches. Another approach is that, particularly by Geras, is in that place there were certain rabbanim, Amoraim, who said that the child's not a yid bichlal. So therefore, he told them, go somewhere else where those Amoraim are not found. But in a place where people will take a look at it as a problem, one will be obligated to give over that information. That's how the Tzitz Eliezer paskins on those lines. And Meir Arik actually he gives explanation going on the lines that he's telling him to go to a place that never ever will they ever find out about your history, and then it's okay, because the whole problem is that people will find out that this person has a bad history. But if it's a situation where they will never find out about his history, that's sort of Meir Arik, and then it's okay. But again, this is a discussion. Tachlis halacha l'maisa, with all the answers, halacha l'maisa in a place where this is considered a chisaron. One is, and in today's world, there's no such a thing as that they'll never find out. Everything gets found out. There's no secrets. There's no things. In the olden days, there's no records. Today, everyone finds out everything. So you can never say, I'll go somewhere and no one's going to find out, because within a matter of time, everything will be revealed. Therefore, one is definitely obligated to give over the information. This brings us to an interesting shaila, which is in the Shut Achiezer, Chaim Ozer. Chaim Ozer had a shaila where a woman was divorced and she met a young man in Vilna, I believe, or maybe somewhere else in Lita, and she tells him, I'm a Girusha, are you a Kohen? And he says, no, I'm not a Kohen. Lo and behold, they get married, and she goes to shul, and she sees that he gets the aliyah of Kohen. She's totally out of it. How are you talking that he got the aliyah of Kohen? And she says, that's it. He's a Kohen. How did he marry me? And she goes ahead and she demands a get. So he tells her, no problem, I'll give you a get. But on the way to the Beis Din, he takes a detour and he left to America. This is Tafresh Ayin Aleph. He disappeared to America, and she's a guna in Vilna or somewhere in Lita. They turn to Reb Chaim Ozer what to do. And Reb Chaim Ozer actually writes a tshuva where he writes that this is a mekach tos. He writes that this is a mekach tos because she married him al das zed that he's not a kohen, and then she found out that he's a kohen, and she clearly said that she didn't want to marry someone such a pagam and go against the Isser Torah. Therefore, he's mevatel the kedushin. He also, I must say, places in there also the aspect that one of the edim was pasul le'edus, etc. But we see the tshuva. A big part of the tshuva is basically on the fact that over here is a mekach tasi, 2 points together to make the heter. But this goes on to emphasize how strong he looked at this pagam, that when someone fooled someone about this pagam, that this enough is one of the reasons why he's being mevatel the kedushin at the time in that particular shaila. So we'll end with this, and this is sort of a quick overview of these halachas, and we should merit to have the true chasna of Kadosh Baruch Hu and Bnei Yisrael, B'Eifin Golui, with the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu v'Korev Yameinu Mamish.
Yesher Koyach, Harav Raskin, thank you very, very much. It's very relevant for people which are a bit above and beyond my age. So as Hashem also Isaac B'Teres Ayla Kila Hikra Ayla, all those Isaac B'Teres Shidduchin, all those who should bring a bracha for Shidduchin, for all those who need a bracha in this area. And Shekaya, thank you very much. We appreciate the fact that you joined us. So we're now going to go to Dr. Lowenthal from London. We're going to travel from Eretz Yisrael to London. We're also very grateful to Professor Lowenthal, who has got a lot on, and he's still, with very, very easy going, happy. He said he's going to find time to say something for us. So, Yeshikoyach, thank you very much, and I'll pass on to Dr. Lowenthal.
Let's unmute. Okay, thank you very much. After this extremely riveting and Nagaya talk that we've just heard from Rabbi Raskin, this is going to be something briefer, hopefully, and rather different. Yesterday's Shir Tanya spoke about the significance of Ein Yaakov. And so my little contribution to this Kinus Torah is basically taking a few Agadata and looking at them a little bit carefully, hopefully, and seeing what we can get out of them, particularly in relation to the Heintiger problem that we have of a pandemic, which is one of the things which leads us to have the silver lining, if you like, that we're able to join each other from several different places, different countries, continents, in this Zoom presentation. So I'm going to start off. Moshe David's kindly enabled me to share the screen. So I'm going to look first of all at Kinus Kof Aleph Amud Beis, and let's just see what we have. So there we are. We're going to begin. Let me just find this. It's right here. We're at Omru. Okay, Omru Leila Rav Yehuda. Right, so that's where we're beginning. You're able to see the screen, hopefully. Yes? Okay, I'm not getting any feedback, but let's hope you are.
Very small, very small.
It's very small.
Hard to read it, yes.
Full screen.
I don't know. Is that better?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Yep, okay. Now here on this blot of Kinus, what it's actually talking about is a plague, and it asks what kind deva, and it starts off with a whole discussion exactly what is a plague, how many people and how frequently, Rahman litzlan, they have to pass away for us to call it to call it deva. So that's on the Amud Aleph and the beginning of Amud Beis, discussing that. But we are going to go to a point where, and here the response to deva or a plague is to fast. That's the thing to do in davening to Hashem. It's in Masechta Tainis, obviously. Tainis is all about Tanesim, for rain or for other issues, and here it is in relation to Rahman litzlan plague. So Amrule the Rav Yehuda, they said to Rav Yehuda, Ika moisna b'chaziri, the dova acher, the pigs, have got this plague. They're ill. Goza tanisa, and he said, okay, we're going to have a tainus. So now we discuss this thing. What does that mean? Neima kosova Rav Yehuda makamushulachas mimin echad. Do we say that if there's a real ferocious plague or illness in one species of animals of kind, then mushalachas mikola minim, so then it's going to be prevalent in all kinds of creatures, even in lahavdil human beings. Like the Gemara says, no, that's not the point. Sha'ani chaziri. Chaziri are different. The damyan me'ayu libnei enshi, because their intestines or something, their inner parts, are similar to human inner parts. So because this creature has got a similar biology inside to human beings, therefore, if there's a plague among the chazirim, so we say it might come to human beings as well, and so he was geyser a fast, a tainis, so that shouldn't come to human beings, to us Yidden. Now Tosfos takes this up, Amru Leil Rav Yehuda, etc. So, and therefore, the Tosfos says, after repeating the basic point, Mikan nira she'im yeh dever al oivdei kochavim, if the goyim have a plague, sheyesh lechush, we have to worry about that, v'yesh lisanos, and we should do a tanesim, because as we see that he made this this gzeira about the deva that was among the chazirim, mishum the dominai, because they're similar to human beings biologically. V'chol shekein the nochrim the domali Yisrael. So how much more Einam Yehudim are similar to Yidden biologically in physical terms, as we know, a whole discussion in Chassidus. Nonetheless, the goof of a Yid is completely different in Kedusha, but nonetheless, in biological terms, it's the same, so as to give Bechira, etc. So therefore we do make the so therefore we say we make a tainis in that. And both these points, whether the Chazirim or the Einam Yehudim, they are brought lahalocha in Orech Chaim Tov Kofayin Vav Sif Gimel. It's a section which unfortunately is not in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. It's one of the parts that are missing, but we have that both these points are brought for halacha. Now, it's interesting to note that in our time, we know that, or it does seem that the deva jumps species, even if it's not particularly similar to human beings. COVID began with a bat, apparently, and there were various other plagues through the 20th century that also were mirrored in animals, and that they came from the animals to the human beings. And one of the things about China is that the Chinese eat all kinds of different creatures, right? The English, let's say, the Einam Yehudim, they're fairly conservative what they eat, whereas the Chinese eat many different kinds of creatures, and therefore several times it's happened that some kind of deva has come from a, that some kind of deva has come to introduce to human beings, having originally been with a different species. So we could say nishtanu hativim, as is a principle that there are various medical things from the time of the Rishonim and the time of the Gemara that don't necessarily apply now. So the Gemara seems to be taking on that the deva will not jump species unless there's a similarity, but we see that in fact it does. However, a point which I'd like to try to suggest is that we don't know what Rav Yehuda's reason was. We've got Rav Yehuda being geyser a tainis when he heard that the pigs, the chazirin, had got this machla. The Gemara discussing Rav Yehuda's view is presenting different options why he's saying it. It could be that from the point of view of Rav Yehuda, a deva does jump species, only that isn't spelled out, and the discussion of the Gemara does not bring that up. But we're left with a question. There's suggestions being made. Does he have this theory that if there's a strong dever in one species, it spreads to another? No, lav dafka. So the chazirim are different, but it could be that Rabbi Yehuda actually held that it does jump species. Now we come to a next point. Amru Leil Shmuel. I hope you can see that. It's just the next point in the page. Amru Leil Shmuel. They said to Shmuel, Ika moisna bechizoi. There is a deva, there is a plague in the place Bechazoi, which is quite a long way from the Hadea where Shmuel was the Rav. Goza Tanisa, he was Gozer at Tainus. Amrulei, people said to him, isn't it a long way away? Oma Lika Mabra Hocha, the Posikle. Now here we come to a question of Girsa in the Gemara. So Shmuel said, Lika Ma'abra Hocha de Posikle. Let's understand Ma'abra as a kind of barrier. Normally Ma'abra means a ferry, something going across a river. But here the sense of the word seems to be a barrier of some kind. So he says, there's no ma'abra here, there's no barrier, the posikle. In other words, there's nothing to stop the moisna coming to us here. So although the plague is far away, mechuzah, but there is there's no barrier in between us and mechuzah. Now let's just have a look at the Rashi. Just 1 second. Sorry. Sorry. Now, Omalahu. Abra Posikluhu. So Rashi seems to have a different girsa. He said, is there a fence? Is there a barrier in the way? And he explains, are there, it might be that it means a crossing of a river, but like it's a gap where it can't cross the river. Or other mechitzas. Mafsikin lifnei adeva shelo yavoi. Are there barriers which will prevent this from coming? It's like a rhetorical question. There aren't barriers. So so now the Evan Yisrael, he brings a girsa from a manuscript, V'chi ma'avra poskile, which is similar to the Rashi. Is there mavra which is making an interruption? So whatever the thing is, there's at this point the Gemara is holding that there's no barrier in between, and so therefore maybe the illness can spread from that distant place to here. Now, then we go on to another incident. We're actually going to come back to Shmuel in a minute. Amru leila Rav Nachman. They said to Rav Nachman, Ika moisna ba'arid Yisrael, chas v'sholem. There's a plague in Eretz Yisrael. Gozer Tanisa. He was Gozer at Tanis, even though he's in Bavel. Omar, and he said, Im gvira loika. If the mistress is suffering, shivcha loikol shekain. So surely the shivcha, the maidservant, like Bavel is a maidservant to Eretz Yisrael, which is like the mistress, the lady who has the maidservant. So the shivcha should also fast, should also be worried. Tama, now the Gemara comments, Tama de gvira v'shivcha. That's in the case when it's the mistress and the maidservant. In other words, Eretz Yisrael and Bavel. Ho shivcha v'shivcha loy. But if it's two countries in Chutz La'aretz, and there's a moisna, there's a deva in one place and not in the other. So you wouldn't expect place A to fast because of place B. Now this is a kasha. V'ha amrulei l'Shmuel, but didn't we just have? They told Shmuel Ika moisna beichuzoi that there is a plague in beichuzoi, and he was goyzer atanis. So there we see that one place in Chutz La'aretz has to be worried because of another place in Chutz La'aretz. The Gemara answers, Sha'ani Hasam, it's different in this case. Given the Ika Shairosa, the Levai Va'asya Bahade. There are caravans, there's travel. And because there's travel, the illness, Levai, the illness comes with the caravans. Now that's a very interesting thing relating to our present situation. 100 years ago, you may be aware, there was a pandemic, another pandemic. It was in 1918 to 1920. There was another pandemic which killed 50 million people. And one of the reasons, Rahman al-Islam, killed more people than those who died in the First World War on all sides. And one of the reasons why that pandemic killed so many people was that there was an enormous amount of travel and troop movement. It began towards the end of the First World War, and troops were coming from one country to another, troops were coming home, people were traveling here and there. There were lots of, within any one country, like within America, there was a lot of movement of people because there were all kinds of celebrations being made, and people did not realize that travel, in fact, was bringing this illness into different places. So it was called the Spanish flu, and it killed many, many people. And travel was part of the reason. And one of the things that we know with, which has been extremely problematic for all of us, or for many of us, is the fact of the clampdown on travel, not being able to travel from here to there. But the rationale is here in the Gemara, that since there are shayarasa, since there are caravans, which are traveling, the camel caravans traveling from one place to another, they can bring the illness along. And so therefore, we have to be very careful. So therefore, that's why Shmuel was able to be geyser at Tainus, even though in Beichuzoi, even though there's where he was in Nahadeya compared with Beichuzoi, there are just two places in Chutz La'aretz, and you wouldn't, if you follow the rationale of being geyser atainus in Chutz La'aretz, because in Eretz Yisrael there's a plague, and if that were the case, one would say that from the Shifcha to the Shifcha you wouldn't be geyser atainus, but in the case of Shmuel, there's this reason which is given because of the caravans. Okay, so that's a little glimpse at Tainus. I now would like to share with another sefer, another piece of Gemara. 1 second. And what I want is Bava Metzia. Now, I'm not sure if you've seen it change to Bava Metzia. Have you seen it change or not?
Yes.
It's changed. Okay, good. You can never tell on Zoom what actually people can see. There's some things that you open it and the other people don't see. The viewers don't see. Okay, so now we're looking at Bava Metzia, Kuv Zayin, on the base, and we have a very interesting discussion about illness. So there we have at the beginning, V'heisir Hashem mimcha kol chayli.
Can you make it bigger?
Let me try and make it bigger. Good. Is that better?
Good. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
V'heser Hashem mimcha kol chayli. Hashem will remove from you every chayli. Omer Rav, zu ayin. Rav says that means ayin. Now, what is the ayin? The ayin is kol chayli deva. Rashi says kol chayli deva, plague. Shekol hachaloim tluim bo. All illnesses depend on it. V'zua ayin. What is this? Ayin ra. Ayin ra. Illnesses come from ayin ra. So that's what Rav says. Rav Latame. The Rav goes according to his reason. The Rav Solik lebei kivre. He went to a certain place where there were kvarim. Ovid Maida Ovid, he did a certain thing. Now let's look in the Rashi. Ovid Maida Ovid, Yodeya Hoya Lilcho Shalakforis. He knew how to do something, some kind of something by the kever, Ulahovin al kol kever v'kever, and then he would know with every individual grave be'eza misa mes, what that person died from. In Meis bin Zmanoi, whether he died at the normal time for him, in ba'ayin ra, or whether he passed away because of an ayin hara. And so so Rav was able to say this in an authoritative way because he made this investigation. And he said at the time, Oma tishin v'tisha ba'ayin ra, 99% out of 100, 99% die ba'ayin ra, ve'echad b'derech eretz, and one dies out of just normal reasons. Now that's Rav's opinion. We all know that Rav and Shmuel are very often mechula. What did Shmuel? Shmuel Lama, Zeh ruach. Shmuel says it's ruach. What causes illness, the plague, and dying is the air. Now that's very interesting. The air. It's something in the air, or it's something carried by the air, and that is the thing which causes the illness. Shmuel the Tame. And Shmuel goes according to his time that he says to Omar Shmuel, Hakol Baruch. They all die because of the air. So now we have a kasha. Ula Shmuel, and according to Shmuel, Ha'ika Haruge Malchus. What about people who are cut by a sword or something like that? Why they're surely not dying because of the air? Hanach Nami. So he answers those two. Ilav Zika Avdilahu Sama V'chai. If it's not for the air which is blowing, which is finishing them off, one would be able to make them a special Sam Chaim, and they would be okay. In other words, putting it into modern English, if not for infection starting, which in the wounds they've got, we would be able to patch them together, and they would live. So he sees the source of illnesses as the air, or we might say, what is carried in the air. Now that concept of the air as having something carried in it. So then comes the question, where is it carried in? Where does it get the negative thing? Does it come from other people or who've got the illness, or does it come just from the surroundings? But that's a position that it's in the air that we have the problem. Now, if we can go a little bit further, and let me see if I can find Shabbos, and I'll try and make it bigger. Right, so here we have Shabbos Kuf Ches Amud Beis, and we are dealing with Shmuel again. Here, now Shmuel had a thing which is called kilorin, and kilorin is a kind of eye ointment. So, I've gone to the wrong line. Yeah, it's here. It should be here. Shalach le Rabbi Yanai lema Ukba. Rabbi Yanai sent a message to Ma Ukba. Please, lishadelon ma. Please, could you send me mehanich kelurin de Ma Shmuel, the special ointment that Ma Shmuel has. Shmuel made a certain kind of eye ointment, and he's asking. So here, Rabbi Yanai is asking Ma Ukba to send him some. Shalach le, he said, so what happened? He sent it to him, and the message, he sent him a message. Shaduri mashadanulach. I am sending it to you. The loy sema tsar ayinano, so that you won't say I'm mean. You asked me for something and I didn't give it to you. So I'm sending it to you. I'm giving you a jar of the ointment. Eila hocha ama Shmuel. But in fact, this is what Shmuel says. You want this ointment from Shmuel. Let me tell you what Shmuel says. Toiva tipus tsoinen shachris. It's better to have a bit of cold water in the morning, urechitzas yadayim v'raglayim b'chamin avis, and washing one's hands and one's feet in hot water in the evening. Mikol kilurin sheba'olam. They are better than all the ointments in the world. Now, this is an extremely interesting position, because what he is saying is that washing is good for health. Now, of course, there's washing all over the Torah, right? There's the kiyah in the Beis Hamikdash and in the Mishkan, and the Kohanim have to wash, and there's tefillas nida, and the nida has to be clean before she has the tefillah, so she has to wash before the tefillah, everything like that. But the idea that that is actually healthy is not so easy to find. And here Shmuel seems to be making that point, that washing is healthy. It's not just spiritually important, washing at certain times, but it is also healthy. And it's intriguing that even the Rambam does not seem, or maybe exactly how the Rambam looks at it, because the Rambam does talk about bathing and showering and things like that. But it's so that's but that's another point looking at Shmuel. Okay, we would need a little bit more chakira to consider exactly what the Rambam's view is. Now, you see, in order to show the thing, I'm host, and so therefore I have to let people in occasionally. So now I want to, now here we're going to look at Ksubas. Now, this is Ksubas Ayin Zayin Amud Beis. Ayin Zayin Amud Beis, and we begin just below the wide, where the wide lines begin. Machriz Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan used to announce, his haru mizvuve shel baalei rosan. Now he's talking about an illness called rosan, and it's not quite clear what rosan is. There are different opinions. Different writers about this give all kinds of different opinions. Let's just call it rosan. It seems to be a severe disease of one kind or another. And it also seems to be infectious. Rabbi Yochanan said, be careful from the flies of the people who have rosan. Rabbi Zera, loy hava Yosef bezike. Rabbi Zera wouldn't sit downwind. If there's a person with rosan and the wind is blowing down from them, he wouldn't sit in the wind. Rabbi Loza loy ayil ba'ale. Rabbi Loza wouldn't go into the tent of someone who's suffering, or the house of someone who's suffering from rosan. Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi lo havi ochli mi bei dahi mavoya. they wouldn't eat, Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi wouldn't eat from the eggs which came from the mavoi, from the alleyway, the alley where someone had rosin. So they had a real strict lockdown approach that someone has rosin, keep away from them, and don't buy anything, any food products from them. Now then we have a very different approach. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Michrach Bohu v'Osik b'Torah. He would chavazich with them. He would come close with them, and he would learn Torah and learn Torah with them. Omar, he said, Ayeles Ahovim b'Yales Chein, the beautiful, beloved gazelle, which is so graceful. Im Chein Mala Aloim Deya, if it brings such grace, such chein to those who learn it, Aguni Loi Magana, surely it is going to protect them. Now that's exactly what we all know from Soita Kof Aleph Omad Aleph, which tells us about Torah, which Aguni Matzli or Aguni. It saves a person and it protects a person as well. So this is using the same kind of philosophy. Torah protects a person, and so therefore, now let's just see what Rashi says. Sorry. Michrach Bahu, Nidbak Etzlam, he would be close to them. B'shah she'oisik b'Torah, at the time he was learning Torah. Umoshivan Etzloi, he would make them sit next to him. Umuftachud shetagen HaTorah olav, and he was certain that the Torah would protect him, v'lo yuzak, and he wouldn't be harmed. Now, I didn't look, I looked in the Mashal, I looked in one or two places. What I haven't been able to find is what effect did he think his Torah learning with them? One of the Mefoshim says he learned Torah with them. So maybe the learning of Torah with the ill person, maybe that helped them as well. Maybe they also were helped by the fact that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi took the daring step of sitting next to the very ill person with an infectious disease. And he's learning Torah with that person. And so therefore, that person is healed. I didn't see someone make that connection directly yet, but maybe it is somewhere. One could look in Oitza Chochma or ask a Chochem who would know. That's when I first went to 770, I met Beryl Levine, after various, from the library. So he said to me, "Tell me, what's the difference between an academic and a Talmud Chacham?" He was like, testing what did I think. So I said to him, an academic, it was in those years we had card indexes. I said, an academic has a card index, and that's how he looks things up. A Talmud Chacham knows it already. So if we would ask a Talmud Chacham, he would know it already, whether there's any Mefoshim which put together this this situation and say that not only was he learning Torah to save himself, and he was doing a chesed by sitting with the unfortunate sufferer from Rasan, but another point as well, he was actually making them better. So I didn't find it, and maybe it's there somewhere. Now, so the interesting thing is the idea that it's flies of Bali Rasan. In fact, the earlier part of this is all about a kind of fly which transmits the illness of Rasan, and it gets into a person's brain and how you're able to do something about it. So there is a pathogen. The modern word is a pathogen, something carrying the illness. So whether we call it a virus or a this or a that, something carrying the illness, and to be careful because there is something carrying it. Now we then go a little bit further, to see a story about Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, a very important story here in the Gemara. Now let's just see where it is. Here we are. Now, Ki Hava Shochiv, when Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was about to pass away. Now remember, we have quite a number of things about Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. He was the person who found Mashiach at the gates of the city, instructed by Eliyahu Novi, and Mashiach told him, he asked Mashiach, when are you coming? And Mashiach said, today. And then it turned out Mashiach didn't come that day, and he said to Eliyahu Novi, he lied to me. And Eliyahu said, what do you mean? Today, hayoim b'kolos tishmoyu. Today, if you listen to my voice. So then we have a whole thing about Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi passing away. And they said, Omrule, they said to the Malach HaMoves, go and do what he likes. In other words, be nice to him. So the Malach HaMoves went and revealed himself to him. And he said, so Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said to the Malach HaMoves, show me my place. So he said, all right. So then Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says to him, Omrule, havli sakinoch, give me your knife. Dilma bavasa sliba orcha, because maybe if you're carrying your knife with which the Malach HaMoves shecks people, you'll frighten me on the way. Yaval nehile, he gave him the knife. So the Malach HaMoves has given his knife to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Kimotala, so when they came there to that part of Gan Eden, he looked over, and the Malach HaMoves was showing him where he's going to be sitting in Gan Eden. Shava, which Rashi explains is Kofatz, he jumped and Nofel lahu gisa, and he fell on the other side of the wall, so to speak, into Gan Eden. So, the Malach HaMoves has a problem now because he's managed to get into Gan Eden without being killed by the Malach HaMoves. So the Malach HaMoves is very upset. Nakte bekane de glime. And the Malach HaMoves took hold of his coat and held it tightly and wanted him to come back onto this Olam Hazeh side so that the Malach HaMoves could do his routine and take Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's life and he'd be buried. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, I swear I'm not coming. So now what do? Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's made a shvur, and the Malach HaMoves is very upset. Hashem said, if ever in his life he made a shvur about something and then asked before one mumche or three hedyot that he's asked about this shvur, nehada, then he will have to go back to Olam Hazeh. Eloi loy nehada, but if he's never asked a rov on a shvur, then he doesn't have to go back. So he didn't have to go back. But now we got the problem with the knife. Omele havli sakinai. So the Malach HaMoves said, give me my knife. Lo havaka yohivle. And he didn't want to give it to him. Nafka baskola, there came a basko ba'omrale and said to him, to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Havnele, please give him the knife, the misbah lebriosa, which is needed for the whole creation for people who unfortunately have to pass away, and that knife is needed so that they should pass away. So we have this dramatic story of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, who covers himself together with the people who are suffering from this infectious disease, and Torah protects him and maybe also helps them as well. And then he, at the end of his life, he wants to take away the knife from the Malach HaMoves. In other words, that there should be the Bela HaMoves Lenetzach. There should be no more Heper Chachai. So then we have a further account. Eliyahu Novi made a whole announcement in Gan Eden, clear the way for Baal Levoy, for Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, And he went and he found Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was sitting there on 13 special tables. And there's a whole discussion between them. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, was the rainbow ever seen in your day? And Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, yes. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, Im kain iato ba levoy, then you're not Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. I thought you were someone special. You're not him. Velohi, but in fact the rainbow wasn't seen in his day. But he didn't want to achzik to dvusel nafshe. He didn't want to be to express this good thing, relating to the previous thing we heard. Interesting talk about Lashon Hara. So he did not want to claim that the rainbow wasn't seen in his day, even though it actually wasn't seen. Now then we have Rabbi Chanina bar Papa, and he was also passing away, and there was a similar sequence with the Malach HaMoves, and he asked for 30 days in which he will chaza over his Talmud, because they say Ashrei mi shebo lekam b'talmuda b'yodoi. Happy is the one who comes here and with his Talmud. So he wanted to do chazara, and so after 30 days comes the Malach HaMoves to him again, and he said the same thing. Show me my place. And the Malach HaMoves says okay, and then he says to the Malach HaMoves, Havli sakinuch, give me your knife in case you frighten me on the way. So the Malach HaMoves says to him, maybe you want to do the same thing as your friend, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. And so he says, Rabbi Chanina says, bring me a Sefer Torah and see whether there's anything in it that I haven't kept. In other words, I've kept the whole Torah, every single word, every single letter of the Torah. But the Malach HaMoves says to him, Omale, mi ichrach bebale rosam, v'yasat b'Torah. Did you sit close up to people suffering from an infectious disease and learn Torah with them? So in other words, from the point of view of the Malach HaMoves, who is, must say, is an expert in these things, the fact of a person having sat close up with the Baalei Rosen and learning Torah with them, whatever its effect, there's an interesting Rashi over here, because Rashi says, "V'asakta b'Torah kadahavid avid ihu," as Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi did. He would put his life in danger in order to show the glory of Torah. So from Rashi's point of view, the reason why Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is doing this is to show the glory of Torah, that through Torah you're protected. And even though you sit close up to the very ill person, when you learn Torah, you are not harmed, and it shows the greatness of Torah. That's how I understand the Rashi. But this is seen, this Havrin Zich with the Baalei Rosen is presented by the Malach HaMoves as something very, very significant. Now we end off this Perek, Hamadia ends off going on with Omer Rabbi Yochanan says, Mipnei ma ein mitzorim b'Bavel, why aren't there lepers in Bavel? Mipnei she'oichlin tadin, because they eat beetroot, v'shoisen shecha, and they drink beer, v'roichsim b'mei poros, and they bathe in the river Euphrates. So the fact of them washing is here again brought as an example of health. So that's this piece of Gemara. Now, Rav Moshe David, is there time to look at a little bit of Ayin Beis?
For sure, yeah.
Yes.
Where Rabbi Shmukla and Rabbi Sadavada, Rabbi Klein are both there, but we'll ask them. Are we okay with? Yeah.
Okay. I'll try and keep it very short.
Yeah, I think they'll be okay, sure.
So I'm just looking for this. 1 second and stop. Oh. If I can't find it, will be a. All right, so this I'm based. Let me just get back to it. 1 second. There. Okay, so I'll try and keep this very short. This is Sif Tov Yud Beis. It's at the end of the Maimah Oz Yosher, and the beginning of Tofrei Shain Hey. And the Maimah begins with the question, why does the Gemara in Sanhedrin explain that Tzadik Aleph Amud Beis, why does the Gemara say that from Oz Yosher Moshe Bnei Yisrael, Mikam Netchias HaMeisim Min HaTorah? What's the connection between Kriyas Yamsuf and Tchias HaMeisim? So the Maimah goes through a fascinating concept of the way that from the flow, from the Gilui, from Atika, from Atik, which is Pnimius HaKeser, all mechitzas, all pasois are dissolved away. And that's a very, very remarkable thing, that all mechitzas are dissolved away. And then it then comes to, I'm using the older edition here simply because it fits into the scanner more easily. So here we are at the end of the Maimah. Right, you know the way that Ayin Beis works. First of all, there's a long discussion in the Haskalah and Avodah, that for that matter, of Chassidus, and then at the end he links it back to the question at the beginning, which was actually written in a different notebook by the Rebbe Rashab. So the Gemara says, from here we learn Tchias HaMeisim from the Torah, because Tchias HaMeisim will be through the Tala de Notif Ma'atika, the dew that comes from Atik, from Pnimis HaKeser. And that is the inyan of Kriyas Yamsuf as well, because at Kriyas Yamsuf there was Nisbatul the Pasa, and he'd explained in the Maimah how all Pasos were dissolved away. But he says a very, very interesting thing, that the way the Pasas dissolve away is that the Or and the Keli, the Or unifies with the Keli, so that the Keli is being Megala de Or. You have the Keli, which is dark in a sense, and the Or, which is light, but then you have the Or connecting with the Keli, and so there you have you've got it on the page above. I'm not sure if you can see it. Shahachoyma hu kli la'or. The choyma becomes the material becomes a kli to the Or, and then he explains that how it works with Kriyas Yamsuf, and all the mechitzas were dissolved away, and exactly that's going to happen with Tchias HaMeisim, that there is a mechitza between our world, the world of the living, and the world of those who passed away, and that mechitza is going to be dissolved away, and we, in comparison to that world, we're like the Keli, and that's the Or, but the Or is going to come into us, so that our world will in fact be, and so there will be the Gilui Gam B'Chinas HaPasa. The Gilui will be in the veil itself. And so B'ezras Hashem, we should see that with the coming of Mashiach and Tchias HaMeisim. Now, Mamash. Thank you.
Right.
Right. I'm going to give back the host to you, Reb Moshe David.
Yeshakech, President. Thank you very much. We're very grateful. And Be'ez Hashem, the bracha, we should see all the illnesses go away, all the mechitzas in Espato, the ultimate refuah of Bila Hamavas Hanetzach very soon. There won't be any illness, there won't be any sorrow, no death, Chas v'shalom.
Amen.
And then there'll be the biggest nechama as well. So now we're going to go on to Rabbi Yisrael David. He has to go next. He's going to talk about, he's got an interesting topic about chinuch. What extent it is. So with those who want, maybe it might be a good idea to grab yourself a good coffee, strong double dose of coffee, so make sure you stay awake. And some also a good piece of chocolate cake, maybe. All right, keep on going. Okay, we'll pass it on to Yisrael David. I'm going to close my mic.
Okay, so when I was growing up, it's probably still the same way. You walk into shul Sukkot morning. Can you hear me clearly? Yeah. So when you walk into shul Sukkot morning, you see different minhagim with the children. You look at the other children, what they're doing, and you see some children come with their own lulav, their own kosher lulav and esrog, and then there's others who come. The parents manage to find them a apostle lulav and esrog, which is all battered up. But it's an lulav, it's an esrog. And then there was always some children who they came in with a lemon and a branch, or even a toy lulav and esrog. They came in with something else, just symbolic of lulav and esrog. So the question that I want to deal with today really is it okay? Well, is one yoytz to the mitzvah of chinuch? Is a father yoytz to the mitzvah of chinuch when he gives his child a pasta lulav, or when he gives a child a lemon? Is he mekayem mitzvah chinuch? Number one, that's question number one. And question number two is it okay? Even if you're not mekayem mitzvah chinuch somehow, perhaps it's still worth something. Is it worth anything to give your child a pasta lulav, or to give your child even worse, a lemon? Is it worth anything at all to do that? Is there any value in it whatsoever? Any halachic and Torah value in doing so? Or is it just to keep him happy? So that's the questions that we're going to be dealing with today. And the second question, when I say is it okay, I mean to say like this. We need to give a little bit of achana about Akdama. About the mitzvah of chinuch in general. So the mitzvah of chinuch, the Alter Rebbe writes in Shin Mem Gimel that the mitzvah from the Magen Avraham, I believe, that hashir chinuch the mitzvah hasehu b'chol tinit lefi charifuse v'yidiyosei b'chol davar lefi inyana kigoyin hayudea mi'inyin Shabbos chayav l'shmoi b'kiddush v'avdala hayudea l'satet b'alocha chayav b'sitzes v'chein kol kayoytz. Because when it comes to mitzvahs aseh, as opposed to mitzvahs lois aseh, by the way, mitzvahs lois aseh, it's if he's a baravona, 2 or 3 years old already, a child knows he's not allowed to do something, so that's it. He's not allowed to do it, and you have to tell him he's not allowed to do it. When it comes to mitzvahs aseh, the chinuch of mitzvahs aseh kol tinig v'tinig lefi charifusoi. It depends on the child, and then the basic idea is that the child has to understand what he's doing and be able to do it. If he knows about Shabbos, he can do kiddush, right? Then he's chayiv in kiddush. If he knows leisate b'tzitzis, he knows how to put on a pair of tzitzis, so then he's chayiv in the mitzvah tzitzis, and so on and so forth. So that is the basic age of chinuch. And the second half of the question, when I said, if you're not mekayim the mitzvahs chinuch, is there still any purpose in doing so? If you're not mekayim the mitzvahs chinuch, then go ahead and do mitzvahs chinuch. But it would be a nafkamina by a cotton she'enoi shelo higir lechinuch, a cotton 3-4 years old, who there's no mitzvah of chinuch per se. So even if you're not mekayim the mitzvahs chinuch, perhaps there's some value in giving him something else, giving him a pasuk lulav, perhaps even giving him a lemon, giving him something symbolic of it. So that is going to be the discussion today. So just to start off, that the pashtos, it seems as if it's a machloikus rishonim ba'achroinim, a machloikus rishonim as well as achroinim who we paskin like, all the way down halacha l'maisa to more recent poskim in this century, previous century, whether one can be, to phrase it differently, in when you're mechanech a child, does he have to do it with all the protei mitzvah? Does he have to do the mitzvah properly or not? Is it good enough for him to do some sort of half measure? Obviously, there's different levels: a lemon, a pasuk lulav, etc., as we'll discuss. So that's the question that we're discussing. So, but pashas, it seems as if it's a machlokas rishonim. What's a machlokas rishonim? First of all, the ritva in sukkah. The ritva in sukkah brings, and while we keep a cheshbon of the shittas, let's just also bring in the proofs to each shitta, or at least the proofs to the shitta. The first shitta we're going to mention is the shitta that yes, the mitzvah of chinuch is that the child does the mitzvah exactly the same as a gadol. B'shlei musa, with all the protei halacha, no exceptions. You can't give your child a pasta lulav, you can't give your child a lemon. He has to do it mamish kipshutai. So the first, the famous person one of the Rishonim who's famous for saying this, that it has to be mamish like a gadol, is the Ritva in Sukkah, Daf Beis, Amud Beis. Everybody knows the Mishnah, Sukkah, she gavoy l'mayla mesrim amud, psula Rabbi Yehuda machshe. Sukkah, which is higher than 20 amas, is pasul. Rabbi Yehuda's machshe. So that's machlek. Halacha is that Sukkah, she gavoy l'mayla mesrim amud is pasul. Rabbi Yehuda says it's kosher. The Brisa says, Amar Rabbi Yehuda brought a raya to his shita, Maisa behilani amalka, that she was sitting in a sukkah which was higher than 20 amos, and Rabbi Yehuda brings as a raya that the sukkah higher than 20 amos is kosher. So the Gemara deals with just a second. What's the raya? She's a woman. A woman is patur min sukkah. So what's the proof that a sukkah higher than 20 amos is possible? What's Rabbi Yehuda bringing a proof to his opinion? So the Gemara basically says, but she did everything. She had 7 children. She had 7 children. Shiva bonim, 7 sons, not 7 children. 7 sons. Shiva bonim havalos. She had 7 sons, and she did all her ma'asim al pi the Rabbanon. And the Rabbanon walked into the sukkah and they walked out and they saw the sukkah and he didn't say anything. So the Gemara, without going to the whole backwards and forwards, the Gemara says that from the fact that from the 7 children, one of them must have been older than the Higia L'Chinuch, must have been older than the age of Chinuch, let's say at least one of them must have been. And therefore, from the fact that the Rabbanon walked in and out and didn't say anything, is a raya that sukkah l'mayla mesrim am is kosher. That's Rabbi Yehuda's proof. We'll say that. So that's his proof. So the Ritva says that from the Ritva says that the fact, just a second, if chinuch didn't have to be with all the pratim, if you could be mekayim the mitzvah of chinuch by sitting in a sukkah which is a pasul sukkah, by sitting with, what's the problem? The woman is parted from the mitzvah, so she doesn't need to sit in the sukkah. The sons, however many children were higher than Yigir L'Chinuch, could sit in a sukkah psula for chinuch. So what's the raya? So therefore, the Ritva says there must be that the raya is as follows. The raya is that she must have been mechanech her children in a kosher way. In other words, that's what Rabbi Yehuda is saying. Rabbi Yehuda is saying that the sukkah was higher than 20 amos, and then yet she sat there with the children. Rabbanon walked in and out and didn't say anything. So the Ritva says it's a raya that the mitzvah has to be done b'kashrus. Otherwise, there'll be no raya that the sukkah l'mayla mesmam is kosher. Maybe sukkah l'mayla mesmam is pasul, and chinuch doesn't have to be done with all the details. They're sitting in a sukkah. It looks like a sukkah. It's got 4 walls. It's got schach. The Seder, that's the mitzvah of chinuch. So that's the Ritva. That's the famous Ritva, which everybody knows that the mitzvah has to be done with all its details. That's number 1. Number 2 is I'm just not necessarily from the Rishonim, but Achronim bring a raya. Okay, we're going to talk about lulav today specifically, but obviously we start with lulav, but we're going to go into chinuch in general, and from chinuch in general to Yisodus in Kol HaTorah Kula. That's going to be the Seder over here. So what's lulav? Yeah, what does the Mishnah actually say? I think it's a Mishnah or Brisa says that Koton hayudea l'nanea es lulav chayav b'lulav. That's something like that. I don't know the exact words, but a Koton who knows how to shake the lulav is chayav in the lulav. So the question asked by many people is, just a second, why does the child need to know how to shake the lulav? The child, we know the mitzvah is a lekachta nochem. You just have to lift up the lulav or move it from one place to another. You just have to take the lulav, lekachta nochem. What the shaking we know is an extra thing. Midrabanan, it's brought down in the Mishnah, in the Gemara, it's taka chiyuv midrabanan. But what's he can be mechanech the child just to take the lulav. Why does he have to know how to shake the lulav in order to be chayiv in chinuch? So from this, many Achronim bring a proof that it must be that the mitzvah of chinuch is, first of all, starts at the age by which he knows how to do the mitzvah properly. Katan hayudea l'nanea, and number 1. And number 2, that's the mitzvah. That's the mitzvah of chinuch. The mitzvah of chinuch is to be mechanechim, to do the mitzvah properly, with all the pratim, with the doiraisas and with the drabanons and with everything. That is them. And therefore, Katan hayudea l'nanea b'lulav chayav. The father he's chayav to do lulav. The father's chayav to be mechanechim. But anything less than that, he's not chayav. So that's the second proof, which Achronim bring, that the father has to be mechanech his child with all the details. Number 3 is a famous sugya. The famous sugya, the Gemara says that on the we spoke about people who buy their children a lulav, people who don't buy their children a lulav, and people who buy their child a lemon or something else. or take a lemon out of the fridge. So the each one has its marker in the shittas, as we'll see. But there's a famous the Gemara which says, I think Bzeira, you're not allowed to, you shouldn't give your lulav over to your child on the first day of Yom Tov. Rashi explains before your yoitza. Before your yoitza, that's how Rashi explains it. You shouldn't give your lulav over to your child because a lulav can be, a cotton can be koineh, but he can't be makneh. In other words, when you give it over to him, you're giving it to him with a matana manas lahaksa. That's the way that he's going to be yoitza the mitzvah, right? So you're going to give it to him a matana manas lahaksa. He'll be able to take it from you. He won't be able to give it back to you, and then you won't be able to do the mitzvah anymore. That's the Gemara. You shouldn't do it before. If you give it after him, after you use it, it's not a problem. That's Pashtus Lashon Gemara. So the Achronim, the Rishonim are busy with different ways of being able to get around it. So one of the things is brought down in Agoyis Ashri B'Shem HaRaivon, the Raivon, he says that if you hold it at the same time as the child, it's okay. Shapidomi, it's brought down by the Mechaber, but for the moment, let's say it's the Raivon. That the Raivon says if you hold the lulav and esrog with your child at the same time, so then it's okay. Then it's okay. So why is it okay? So the answer is because when you hold it, you haven't given it over to him. You're just letting him shape your lulav, and it's okay. So the question, and he says that the Nikiyah Hadas would do another Bekiyah Hadas, the people who knew how to get around the problems, they would do slightly different. They would actually just shake it. They would just let the children take it and return it to its place, and then they would do their mitzvah. So the question is, how do these eitzes help out? The eitzes help out the adult. The adult can now be mekayim the mitzvah because he hasn't given it over to his child. His child either was holding it with him or took it without his knowledge, but it's still his. He never gave it to them as a matana. How was the child yotzei's mitzvah? It was at best it was borrowed. At worst it was mamish the father's. So how does it work? So therefore, the Achronim learn that from these Rishonim who say that if you hold it at the same time, the Shapidomi, that Shapidomi means that it's good for both the father and the child. The father can be yoitza because it's his, and the child can be yoitza because it doesn't need to be his. He can have a borrowed lulav on the first day. He can have a lulav which isn't his, because a child doesn't have to be mekayim the mitzvah with all the protei hamitzvah. Well, it's good enough that he has a lulav and an esrog. It doesn't matter that it's shol, that it's borrowed, or that it's not his. That is how some Rishonim learn it. Other poskim, the Magen Avram and other Roiv Achronim, by the way, I would say Roiv Achronim say that no. The whole Gemara is only busy with how the father can do the mitzvah of lulav without causing him problems. We're not getting into the child's the issue with the child. That's and therefore you taka not yoyt to the mitzvah of chinuch. With the you taka not yoyt to the mitzvah of chinuch by lending your child the lulav or by holding on to him at the same time. That's what Roiv Achronim learn. So, and the Gemara is just busy with, just to add, by the way, that the Gemara, if you think about it, the Mishnah, if we're talking about Eretz Yisrael, only the first day has to be lachem. The second day in Chutz La'aretz is the machlokes Rishonim whether it has to be lachem or not. But for sure, in Eretz Yisrael, the second day doesn't have to be lachem. So therefore, the Gemara is saying very simple: don't give it to your child before you use it. Let him take it after you use it. It'll be his. It'll be the cottons because you're giving it to him after you use it. But mabakat, the next day you're using the cottons, the lulav. It's shol, but shol is okay on the second day. But lemaisa in Chutz La'aretz, it's been a big problem because if we choishes for those days which say that the second day should also be lachem, and therefore there's no eitzah. How can you do it? You can't give it to your child afterwards. So the only eitzah is that you're holding it with him at the same time. So then you're not yoyt to the mitzvah of chinuch according to certain poskim, according to these poskim. So these poskim say that taka, the best thing to do is to buy your child. What would come out from these poskim is the best thing to do is to buy a child who's chayiv in chinuch you have to buy him his own lulav. In fact, Moshe in Igros Moshe actually says a very interesting pshat. He says that just a sec, he raises the problem that the Marshal asks the kasha. The Torah and the Shulchan Aruch, just copying the lashon of the Torah, changes from the lashon of Gemara. The Gemara says katan hayidei l'nanei chayav, something like that. The katan, he's chayav in the mitzvah. If he knows how to shake, he's chayav in the mitzvah. The Torah and the Mechaber, the Torah is the first one. The Rambam says the same lashon as the Gemara. The Torah says katan hayidei l'nanei aviv chayav liknus le'lulav. that the father is chayiv to buy him a lulav. Now it doesn't say that in the Gemara. And moreover, the Gemara says certain mitzvahs you do have to buy. Aviv chayiv liknis lo tefillin, aviv chayiv liknis other mitzvahs. It says chayiv liknis, and here it doesn't say chayiv liknis. So l'chura, what's going on? The Torah and the Mechaber are adding something that the Gemara doesn't say. So says the Ramosha. So the Marshal asked this question on the Torah. That's what the Marshal asked. Ramosha has a whole long chat, and basically what he says is that no, obviously the Torah was in Chutz La'aretz. The Torah is in Chutz La'aretz. The mitzvah of chinuch be'etzem chayav these chayav can be done by giving the child the to do after. But the Torah was in Chutz La'aretz, so the only way of being the Torah held, not like the Raven, the Torah held that in order to fulfill the mitzvah of chinuch, the child has to use his own lulav, and therefore there's no eitzah. The only eitzah, because it's 2 days, you can't give it to after, because you can't give it to him after you use it, because then what's going to be the second day? If you give him your lulav and esrog after you use it, the second day you're not going to have a lulav anymore. So the only eitzah is to buy a lulav, and that's pshat in the Torah. That's what Ramosha says, pshat in the Torah. Aviv chayiv liknus. There's other answers, but that's what Ramosha says. So just to summarize what we've said till now, it seems to be that there's a machlokes rishonim and achronim, and many poskim, and we've just quoted the different poskim who say that both sides of the coin. Yeah, many poskim say that if in order to be mechanech a child, he's got to be mamish with all the protei hamitzvah, and therefore child's not yoitza with sha'ol. That's what the Magen Avraham and the El Yirab and the Pri Megadim and so on. They all say that the mitzvah, and the Ritva says it clearly, that the mitzvah has to be done with all the pratim, and therefore sha'ol l'chura is no good, and therefore the only eitz of a katan shegir lechinuch is taka for him to come with his lulav into shul. If he doesn't have his own lulav, then you haven't been mekayim the mitzvah of chinuch. We'll soon get to a child who's pakas migil chinuch. But a katan shegir lechinuch, you need to be mekayim the mitzvah of chinuch. You have to buy him a lulav. There's no other eitzah because in chutz la'aretz, because it's 2 days Yom Tov, and the second day you need your lulav back. You need lachem. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, it seems that the Raven and other Big Day Yesha, there's other poskim who say that you are yoitza the mitzvah with sha'ol because chinuch is good enough. Some of the shoyness, some of the poskim say it's good enough that the child thinks he's doing a mitzvah. It doesn't really need to do a mitzvah. For chinuch, you don't have to do a mitzvah. It's nidmeloi. He thinks what's the whole point of chinuch? The whole point of chinuch is kadesh yisragel. When he's old, he'll get into the habit of doing a mitzvah. He's doing a mitzvah. As far as he's concerned, he's doing a mitzvah. It's a kasher, a little bit esrog. It's just it's shol. It's borrowed. It's not his. He's getting into the habit of doing a mitzvah. And the others will say no. Chinuch is that you mechanech your child to do a mitzvah. It has to be a mitzvah Hashem, or that it's his own lulav, and therefore the only eitzah will be for us living in chutz la'aretz is to buy the child. The katan shegir lechinuch has to have his own lulav and esrog. So but pastors is a machlokes rishonim. So going back to our original question, you come to shul the first day, you see, when I always thought it's a joke. Child comes to shul with a lemon and a apostle lulav, apostle esrog. It's a joke. There's no value, but perhaps it seems at this stage, at least, that it's a machlokes rishonim. There's those shittahs which say that it's okay. The mitzvah, as long as he thinks he's doing a mitzvah, it's okay. Doesn't actually have to be doing a mitzvah. He can be mekayim the mitzvah of chinuch with the child, thinking that he's doing a mitzvah. And others say no, it has to mamish be a mitzvah. That's what it would seem like bashkafa rishona. However, that's not. It's lav dafka, very very big lav dafka that's the case. Not necessarily the case. Why so? So I will just hack them two points. Number one is that had them 2 points. Number one is that just a second, we had some strong rayas. That the mitzvah has to be done b'shlei musa. Hilani Amalka, we mentioned earlier, the Ritva brought a raya from Hilani that the Rabbi Yehuda brought a raya that the sukkah must have been kosher, even though it was higher than 20 amos, from the fact that she was sitting there with her children and being mechanech her children. It's a strong raya that the sukkah has to be kosher. So what will the other Rishonim say about that? That's number one. Question number one. Question number two is that there seems to be a stira in the Mishnah Brura how he paskins on this issue. In one place, he says clearly, in the Bir Halacha, he says clearly that it's pashut, you have to give your child a kosher set of a lulav and esrog. That's on the one hand. And on the other hand, in the Sharet Tzion, when Tafresh Nun Ches, where he talks about the father not giving over the child the lulav, there he seems to side with the shitta which says that shol is okay, that borrowed lulav is okay. And he says it's even mashma. So from the Mechaber says if you hold it at the same time if you hold the lulav at the same time as the child, is shapidomi. Shapidomi sounds like it's good. It's good for everyone. It's good for the father. It's good for the child. What do you mean? It's not the child's lulav and esrog. So the Sharet Tzion seems to lean towards Not shit. Asha Alkain, in order to answer these two questions, it's nothing I'm saying is Kiddushim. It's all written down in other places. So many Achroinim say it's very simple. There's a distinction over it. For sure, you can't give your child a pasal. Everyone would agree you can't give your child a pasal. You have to mechanech him to do something which is mamish looks like a mitzvah b'shleimusa. You're giving him a kosher lulav, a kosher eser. The only discussion is whether if it's borrowed, it's a problem. A prat of Shaul, that's a problem. The Mishnah Berurah, the steer between the Mishnah Berurah is answer. Because on the one hand, he says that the Dal Minim have to be kosher. On the other hand, he says that Shaul is okay, but it has to be kosher lulav. So right, number one. And number two, the raya from Hilani Amalka is also, you can't give, is also not, right? Shaul is a prat in the mitzvah, but you have to have a chevtz of the mitzvah. You have to have a kosher sukkah. You have to have a kosher lulav. If you don't have a kosher sukkah, kosher lulav, there's no mitzvah whatsoever. The prataya mitzvah can be lacking. The fact that it should be his and it's not his and it's borrowed and his father's holding it at the same time, that's okay. So if we pause, so for pashtus, it seems it's the machlokes rishonim, but now we've said that it's very likely that everyone would agree that apostle lulav and apostle esrog are for sure lemon. You're not makayim the mitzvah of chinuch at all. The only discussion is about Shaul. But even with regards to Shaul, it's not clear who the halacha is like, right? It's not clear. Lemaisa, the Mishnah Berurah says one way, but many other achronim, it's idiok in the Sharet Tzion, really. It's not mukhrach that that's the case, but it seems as if the Mishnah Berurah paskin that Shaul is okay. On the other hand, most achronim paskin that Shaul is not good. So lemaisa, it seems that you really should buy a lulav. And Ramosha in this tshuva, which he discusses, it says that the fact that in Europe no one used to buy a lulav was because it was lulav and esrog for the child, is because they relied on the Raivan, they relied on the shitta that Shaul is okay. But really we should be machmir, because halacha really is like those who say that Shaul is no good. But going back to our original question, to give your child a pasal lulav, that's lekula alma will be a problem. It's not chinuch. There's no point in it, and there'll be no point whatsoever in it at all, because the only discussion between the Rishonim is whether Shaul is okay, whether you're lacking a certain prat, but you need a kosher lulav, a kosher esrog. You need it to be a kosher lulav and kosher esrog, a kosher sukkah, a kosher pair of tzitzis. You're not going to give him some sort of pretend plate tefillin, right? The same question: the plate tefillin. You give your child a plate tefillin. Is there some sort of value in it, or not? So it seems clear at this stage that there's no point whatsoever. But I just want to say that that's not necessarily the case. That although it's clear that you're not mekayim the mitzvah of chinuch, the chiyuv of chinuch, there still could be this value in giving your child. Let's say he's a katan shelo yigeh lechinuch, right? If he's a katan shegeh lechinuch, you've got a chiyuv chinuch. But let's say it's a katan shelo yigeh lechinuch. Is there any value whatsoever in giving your child a pasal lulav or a lemon? To be to give him the impression that he's doing the mitzvah, or to give him some sort of chinuch. So it seems as if that I don't want to suggest that there is such a concept. But Hakdam, there's two sichas of the Rebbe, two different places where the Rebbe, first of all, the Rebbe suggests, and many achronim learn this way as well, slightly b'nuschoi shoynus and in slightly different versions perhaps. But the general gist of what they're saying is as follows: that there's a mitzvah of chinuch min haTorah. There's two types of chinuch. There's a chinuch min haTorah and there's a chinuch midrabanan. What we're always familiar with is a father being mekayim his son to do a mitzvah kitikuna, which is a chiyuv midrabanan. But there's another type of chinuch. There's another type of chinuch which is a chiyuv min haTorah. The hakdam, the kasha as follows. There's a kasha which the Rebbe asks that l'chora it's impossible to suggest that mitzad the Torah, before the Rabbanon came along and said there's a mitzvah of chinuch, that a person can let his child till 13 do whatever he wants, assays, loisa, right, do whatever he wants, and then when he's 13, he's suddenly going to be expected to mitamol start doing the mitzvahs properly. Min haTorah, that's what it sounds like. So therefore, the Rebbe suggests in a sikha, in a number of sikhas, that there is a chiyuv chinuch min haTorah. In other words, there's a mitzvah, there's a concept to bring your child in the proper way, that when he's 13, he'll be able to behave in the proper way. So what's the difference between the chinuch min haTorah and the chinuch midrabanan? So the Rebbe says that the difference is that the chinuch min haTorah is just a general idea. It's a general idea to get him in the habit. It doesn't have any gidorim. It doesn't have any clear hagdoras of exactly how it has to be done. It's not like you have to teach him to do the mitzvah properly. And you teach him the ideas, you get him in the habit of doing mitzvahs. It doesn't have to be that every time, however a father sees fit, right? It doesn't have to be with all the pratim. Now, the mitzvah of chinuch is that you get your child to do the mitzvah with all its details. And the Rebbe says in these sikhas that it's self-understood, because when I tell a person to shake the lulav on the 15th of that's the mitzvah. It's self-understood, it's implicit that the person has to buy a lulav before the Yom Tov. It doesn't say anywhere, I haven't seen anywhere in the Torah that there's a chiyuv to buy a lulav, right? So the you could say there's no chiyuv to buy a lulav. Comes elamai, it's implicit. The Torah tells you lekachtem lachem, so you have to there's a chiyuv of a hechsher mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah to buy a lulav, but it's a chiyuv min Torah to prepare yourself to be able to do the same thing with the child. In order for the child to be ready to do the mitzvah of 13, is implicit in that there's also some sort of chiyuv to get him on the right path. The Rabbanon came along and expanded that, or they further distilled it and made it clearer that the mitzvah has to be with all the protim, and and he has to do it properly, and he has to shake, he has to be moilich, mevi, mal, and moirid, all the different directions. That is what the Rebbe says in a number of sichas. But in fact, at the end, the Rebbe actually, in some sikhs, the Rebbe rejects it, and he says that it's different. You can't compare it to the case of a child, of a lulav on the 14th, because then there's a chiyuv. He's a bar chiyuva, but a child before he's 13 isn't a bar chiyuva, and and therefore it's impossible to say. To say that there's a mitzvah before he's chayav, to ensure that later when he's chayav he has to do the mitzvah. The Rebbe rejects this approach, but either way, this is an approach which is brought down in many places. And if this is correct, then there'll be then one could say that giving your child a lemon, a 3-year-old child a lemon, or a 4-year-old child a pastel lulav, and so on and so forth, and giving a 5-year-old child a clay tefillin, toy tefillin, is yashbazem mishum this chinuch min haTorah, this general notion, this general idea of getting your child in the habit of doing mitzvahs, even though he's not doing a mitzvah at all. And you won't be mekayim any mitzvah of chinuch midrabanan, but you'll be mekayim this general mitzvah klali. Now the Rebbe rejects this, and therefore you could say, well, the Rebbe rejects it, so we don't have any makor for such a thing. But the truth is that the Rebbe rejects this surah, this form, this way of saying that there's a chiyuv klali of chinuch min haTorah, but there's a slightly different, very different Havana, which basically both sikhs were actually in Tafshin Mem Zayin. Achron Shal Pesach and Shabbos Parashat Shmini, Tafshin Mem Zayin, the Rebbe spoke about this hechsher mitzvah, the idea that there's a chiyuv min haTorah, that the child should prepare himself for, or the father should ensure that the child should prepare himself for when he's older. And the Rebbe we rejected that pshat. And then in Shavuos Tafshin Mem Zayin, the Rebbe over there, and this is where we get to much beyond chinuch. The Rebbe says basically that there's such a concept of something being a chiyuv, which is not a mitzvah. In other words, a mitzvah is something that Eibishter clearly communicates to us in the Torah that you've got to do such and such. You've got to, right? And then there's other things which you want to call it common sense or logic. There's logical imperative that the hechra das and seichel dictates that this is the proper thing to do. And the Rebbe gives many examples. One of the examples is that in chinuch itself, the Rebbe says that, for example, if you look in Shulchan Aruch, the father is chayav to, right? And Alter Rebbe paskins, as Machlokes Rishonim about it, but Alter Rebbe paskins that the father is chayav to be mechanech his children, but a mother is not mechuyev. Now, you're going to tell me that therefore a mother is exempt. She shouldn't be mechanech her children. There's no. So, and we find the fact the Shlo actually says that noshim are mitzuvas, noshim are they're enjoined to be mechanech their children even more than men. They're in the house more. So what's going on? So the Rebbe basically says that yes, there's two types of chinuch. There's a mitzvah of chinuch midrabanan, which is on the father, which is that the child should do the mitzvah kitikuna, and then there's a chiyuv mitzad hechra hadat mitzad seichel, a logical imperative that it's mivusas ba'atzem on Rabbeinu Nissim Goin and the Chizkuni and the Ramban, that they all say b'negei to goyim. Chizkuni and the Ramban has been negate to goyim. That the Chizkuni asks the question, the Mashal, that we know that the goyim al derech hapshat. If you look in the psukim, the goyim weren't mitzvah in the Shava mitzvahs before the Mabul. They weren't before the Mabul. Al derech hapshat. If you look in the psukim itself, you don't see that maybe some of them there were. But Chamos, right? The Gzardin was on Chamos, was on Gezel. They weren't told anywhere clearly not to steal. So why are they getting there's a flood? They're getting punished. So the Chizkuni writes, what do you mean? Some things don't need to be told explicitly. There's a chiyuv, but people have inside them a whatever you want to call it, logic dictates, or an inner morality that we're created with, or however you want to put it, that certain things are not allowed, and they were punished for that. So the Rebbe says that there's many things like that. Not everything was communicated clearly in the Torah. There's certain things which are, it's not a mitzvah therefore, but it's a chiyuv. It's a chiyuv that the Eibishter expects from us, that anything which a person, which logic dictates, right? So logic dictates, you have a child, you love your child, you want him to go on the right path. It's obviously that there's some sort of chiyuv chinuch. If you don't want to call it minat Torah, so minat chiyuv aseichel. And the Rebbe, one of the examples is chinuch. One of the examples is that chinuch, besides for the mother, but even in the father's chiyuv of chinuch, there is such a thing. And therefore, I just want to suggest that perhaps we can say that there is some value in giving your 3 or 4 year old child who's not chayiv in chinuch a lemon or toy lulav or toy tefillin, because even though you're not mekayim the mitzvah, even though you're not mekayim the mitzvah midrabanan, you certainly can be mekayim this inyan, this chiyuv of chinuch, which is mipnei hechra das, which seichel dictates, which logic dictates. So to summarize what we've said till now, basically, a katan sheigia lechinuch would seem like this: a katan sheigia lechinuch, a katan who's a gia lechinuch, who's the age of chinuch. There's a machlokes rishonim whether he needs to have a kosher lulav and kosher esrog with pashtus. The machlokes rishonim and akronim probably it seems to be only whether it has to be with all the protein. It has to be with all the pratim. Can he be yotze with shaul, for example? Can he be yotze with a borrowed lulav and esrog? That's a machlokes rishonim, and historically we relied on the more lenient opinion that he can be yotze mitzvah shaul because lulavim weren't accessible and srogim weren't accessible, and therefore in chutz laaretz we had to rely on it, and that was the situation. But but now that the lulavim and esrogim are more accessible, then the chura, it seems clear that one should be machmir and buy a child a katan she'yigil lechinuch his own lulav and esrog, so that he can perform the mitzvah in the proper way. Because there are many shittas, maybe even most of the achronim, who seem to say that you have to do it all the pratim. As far as the pasul lulav, it seems as if you're not mekayim the mitzvah of chinuch. But when we say you're not mekayim the mitzvah of chinuch, we mean to say you're not mekayim the mitzvah of chinuch midrabana. The mitzvah of chinuch, that when a child knows how to do each thing, he's chayav to do the mitzvah in its entirety. That you're not obligated to. That can't be done with a pasul law. But the general inyan of chinuch, which is mitzad, either we offer 2 approaches, either minat Torah. I just want to go back a moment. There's an interesting raya which some bring with regards to this concept of chinuch minat Torah. We see by Yom Kippur mechanchin l'shois, right? You mechanech a child that if you ruggle certain ages. You see the details in Hilchos Yom Kippurim. Certain ages you mechanic him l'shois. The question is just a second: when do you ever have a concept of being mechanic someone with half a mitzvah? It's not a mitzvah to fast a few hours of the day. The mitzvah is to fast the whole day. So when he's able to fast the whole day, and like it says, mis'ana or mashlim, when he's 11 or 12, so then there's a chiyuv according to some shittas to fast. So fine. But when he's younger, mechanic l'shois. What's the idea? So Rabbeinu Manoach and others suggest that pshat is that there's 2 types of chinuch. There's certain places where we see the chinuch is do the mitzvah kitkun, and that's the general concept of chinuch. But then there's another idea, chinuch minat Torah, to different type of chinuch, a general type of chinuch, to mechanech him on the right way. But even if we reject that there's a mitzvah of chinuch minat Torah like the Rebbe does, the Rebbe still sticks with the fact that there is a chiyuv, maybe not minat Torah, but chiyuv minat seichel, logical imperative that a person brings up his child, and Hashem expects us to do things even which are not clearly in the Torah, things which logic dictates that this is the right thing to do. Person has a son, he loves his son. Obviously, he wants to bring him in the right way. Now we know that really all the mitzvahs that we do today are bad. Some just chinuch for la'aseh loveh. When Mashiach comes, we then will mamish do the mitzvahs b'shleimusam with all the pratei mitzvah. Now we're not able to do all the pratei, meaning we're not able to do all the mitzvahs. So as Hashem, we should be zeicha to the time we'll be able to keep all the mitzvahs. Amolar, it's there. Hashem Kamayim Yom Chasim to the coming of Mashiach. Sidkeinu B'kar Mamish.
Thank you very much. Amazing. Dr. Lowenthal pointed out that there's this famous story. There's a story about the Alter Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek. Something he used to play around by the Alter Rebbe, is davening, and wore a tefillin made out of potatoes and strings. So I don't know. Maybe that the proof from that story is, I guess, every detail in the stories that the Frierdiker Rebbe told about the Rebbeim is important. And I think the gist of that story isn't about so much about the tefillin, but the fact that if you ever chose to include it, maybe there's a hera over there that that these are the type of toys children should play with, perhaps. Anyway, thank you very much. It's a good thing you said it after Sukkot. That way, now those who didn't, we saved at least that's the Sukkot. Whoever didn't buy a set for their children, so they got away this Sukkot. Next to Sukkot, so you're gonna make sure to buy a set of lulav for your children. Is that, if that's what you're implying? Anyways, we're gonna move on to Rabbi Yossi Shmukler, also in New York now. And like Dr. Lowenthal said, this is a silver lining of having a Kinus Torah via Zoom. That we can have speakers from across the world. So we're going to pass on to Rabbi Shmukler. And Shakaya for making it tonight. Thank you very much. Okay.
Okay. Bruchim Aboim. You able to hear me? Hope so.
We hear you.
Okay. There's a verse from the Rebbe. The Gemara tells us that Shmini Atzeres, be'etzem, even though it's a continuation of Sukkot, it's Shmini, but it's also a regel b'fnei atzmi. It's also a Yom Tov for itself. Pertaining to 6 things, it's a Yom Tov for itself. And the Gemara gives us siman. It's Pezer Keshev, Payis, Zman, Regel, Korban, Shir, and Bracha. Pertaining to 6 halachas, Shmini Atzeres is a separate Yom Tov from Sukkot. It's a Payis b'fnei atzmi. In the Beis Hamikdash, they would make a separate girdle for the avodah of the kohanim, and so on. Zman, you make a shechionu. Pertaining to 6 things, it's a regel b'fnei atzmi. It's interesting. This Pezer Keshev is something that you come across many times, and you don't even know how to pronounce it. I had different teachers. One teacher pronounced it Pazar Kasav. Another teacher pronounces it Pazar Kashav. Everyone pronounces it different because it's a siman in Gemara. And when the Gemara gives a siman, you more or less just read the words, and it's just a sign, a siman, and you don't pay too much attention. And even the art scroll, over the years, I was trying to find out about this word, how to pronounce it. The art scroll doesn't even give Nekudis, if I remember correctly. Steinsaltz gave the Nekudis of Pezer Keshev, actually with segels. But I never, okay, there's a siman. However you read it, you go weiter. A little while ago, it's actually a few months ago, I came across a sikh of the Rebbe in Tov Shin Nun. The Rebbe says that Pezer Keshev actually has a meaning to it. Pezer means Yidden are scattered around. Yidden, Pizreine, we are mefuzer ben ha'amim. Keshev means we listen, vayakshev, we listen. That even though Yidden are scattered between all the nations, still Keshev, we still listen to the Eibishter. So first of all, the sikh of the Rebbe gave me a whole new light, that the Pezer Keshev is not just a siman, it actually has a meaning. Pezer Keshev, Yidden, no matter where we are, we're always listening to the Eibishter. That's number one. Then, number two, I was just thinking of we have something called, when the Torah puts something in a klal, and then the Torah tells us about one of them, so we say, it's coming to teach you about the entire klal. And not only for itself, but it's actually coming to teach you for the entire klal. I'm wondering if this vort of the Rebbe, is it just a vort pertaining to this siman in Shas? Or perhaps it's a vort for all the simonim in Shas. It could be all the simonim in Shas are not just simonim, but there's actually a meaning to the word. And it makes a lot of sense, because the concept of a siman is to give you something to remember. And if you're just giving the first letters of everything, it's very hard to remember. It makes sense. It's a word that has some meaning. Now you see Pezer Keshev. Oh, I'm not going to forget that. It has a meaning to it. It's going to help you remember. If this is a true vort, that the Rebbe's vort is not just a vort by Pezer Keshev, it's a vort pertaining all the simonim in Shas, it's going to answer 2 questions that I had when we were learning Elam Metzias and other Masechta Sukkah simonim, where the Gemara gives, where we find 2 things very unique in the simonim that the Gemara gives. First of all, the Gemara sometimes gives a siman. Let's say now we're learning Eila Mitzias, where there's a Machlekes Abaye and Rava of you Shalei Midas, have a you Shalei have a you. So the Gemara gives us siman for all the kashis that we're going to ask, all the tashmas and rayas that we're going to bring either to Abaye or to Rava. And if you look through all the rayas, you're going to see that there's an extra few letters in the siman that the Gemara gives that are not found in the Shaklavatari of the Gemara. That means the Gemara is giving you a certain siman, and there's a few extra letters that you don't know what to do with. And the Mefarshim ask, what are these extra letters doing here? Another thing we see is that the Gemara doesn't always chap the first letter of the word. The Gemara sometimes chap a letter in between. If let's say there's a word, for example, mois, lav dafka, the siman will be the mem. The siman could be the ayin. I'm just giving an example. So the question is, what's going on? If you're giving a siman, give the first letter of whatever the raya is, and only give whatever the raya is. Why are we giving sometimes the middle letter and sometimes we're giving extra letters? But if this is true, that the simonim and shas all have meaning to it, so then that perhaps will answer this question. That being that we want a siman that has meaning, therefore, sometimes to get that word that has meaning, we have to chap the siman has to chap a letter that's in the middle. And sometimes we have to add a few extra letters that there should be meaning. That's one ha'ara I wanted to say, something that I came across lately. Another ha'ara also I wanted to share with you is that something that's bothering me a lot of many years. And also I came across something that perhaps answers the question. That we find in the Gemara so many times that the Gemara quotes something. You're learning Masechta Kiddushin, you're learning Masechta Bava Metzia, whichever Masechta you're learning, in order to understand it fully, you have to learn a different Masechta. You have to learn another place in Torah. As it says, Divrei Torah aniyim b'mokem echad and ashirim b'mokem acher. A lot of times you don't understand it fully. You have to wait till you learn something else that you'll understand it, the concept here. And the question is, why didn't the Eibishter make every Masechta a Masechta for itself? Masechta Kiddushin. You learn it, now you know the whole Kiddushin. Masechta Bava Metzia, now you know the whole Bava Metzia. It doesn't work that way. A person could be a professional in one sugi in Torah, and he's lacking because he didn't learn a different sugi in Torah. Every sugi in Torah adds sometimes to understand it in a basic level, and sometimes to add a deeper understanding. So why is it that way? So I came across a maimer of the Mittel Rebbe. We had a speaker here earlier that was a mumche in the Mittel Rebbe's maimerim. The Mittel Rebbe has a maimer, Maimori Admuram Soi in Dvorim Chela Gimel. The first maimer Aten Nitzavim Hayoim, which is very interesting. This maimer was published for the first time, Tov Shin Lamed Beis, and the Rebbe actually divided the maimer into 33 Eisius, and they printed it then. And the Rebbe actually said a maimer that year, Tes Kislev or Yud Kislev, he said a maimer, he said on the Chazir over the first few Eisius of this maimer and explained it, and said Ha'aretz, the Rebbe said a maimer Tov Shin Lamed Beis on this maimer. So in this maimer, the Mittel Rebbe, Aten Nitzav Mayim Kulchem, the Mittel Rebbe goes into the concept of Achdus, how there's unity by the Yidden. How there's unity by Yidden. How there's unity by the Yidden. So, okay. The concept of Atem Nitzavim Hayim Kulchem, how there is the unity by the Yidden. Tati said that's under dimensions. So you have to
What's the name?
Under dimensions, okay. Come back. So Atem Nitzavim Hayim Kulchem, there's a concept of unity by the Yidden. The Mittel Rebbe goes into Barichis, this whole concept of Achdus. Beautiful maimer, how the Mittel Rebbe explains that in Kedusha, there's a maila in everything. It's not that one thing has everything and the other thing doesn't have it. That's the difference between Tikkun and Toyu. We know Kedusha comes from Tikkun. That in Tikkun, it's like a person's body. There's the head and there's the feet, but you can't say the head has everything. The head has a lot and the feet receive from the head. But in certain things, the head receives from the feet. In certain things, the feet are the head and the head is the feet. Like, for example, when you have to heal the person, so you have to take blood to heal him. And sometimes you have to take that blood only from the feet. And that's what's going to heal the entire body. So to in Klal Yisrael, we know there's Yisachar and Zvulun. So seemingly we're going to say Yisachar is sitting and learning Torah. They're the head. Zvulun is doing business. They're more the hands and the feet. But we know, we say Smach Zvulun b'tzisach Yisachar be'olecha. We put Zvulun first because Yisachar could only learn Torah through Zvulun. So there's a mila in Kedusha, there's a mila in everything. And he starts to say how even countries, we find the Eibishter made, there's no country that has everything. For oil, you have to come onto a different country. I'm just giving examples. He says, but every country has to come onto another country for certain things. That's the way the Eibishter made it. And that's the concept of Ishvaruch b'fnei kol adam, or Moshe Rabbeinu was an on of mikol adam. Wasn't just that Moshe Rabbeinu has a great concept of Anidus, but it's true. There is a certain aspect that we are shvaruach b'fnei kol adam, that you see that every person has a certain maila, and in that maila that he has, we are shafel from him. We are lower than him. In that concept, he's the mashpia, we're the mekab. And he goes on to say that this is the way Yidden are in essence. But being that we went to Golus Beino Umis, has an effect on us that we start having this period. And the Iker concept of Golus, he says, the Iker in of Golus, is that Yidden are scattered between the nations. What does it mean we're scattered? We're scattered between ourselves. That's the Iker concept of Golus. That being that we're scattered between the nations, that affects us, that we become scattered between ourselves. We don't feel that Achdus. And that's the concept of Golus. And as a preparation for Rosh Hashanah, we have to have the Atem Nitzav Mayim Kulchem. We have to bring back this concept of Achdus, because that makes us a vessel for the entire concept of Kedusha. And he starts to say how we find Lahavdu by the Goyim, the leaders, each of them want to be independent, totally independent, not dependent on anyone else. That comes from Klipit, and which its source comes from Toyu. But this is the way it is in Kedusha. And he adds, in the Maimer, he adds one line which I want to share with you. It's on page Tovshin Memtes. It's an Eis Ches in the Maimer, where he says that Torah, this is the whole concept of Tikkun, which we know Torah is Zeisa Torah Odom. Torah is Odom, which is a concept of Tikkun. And therefore he says, V'yesh bo prokim v'shayfim u'kulim zeim zeh ke'evri Odom and bli she'im tzoreish v'seif. He says, so too, that's why Torah also, we don't find the head and the end in Torah. The exact same thing is by Torah too. Why by Torah don't we have each Masechta doesn't need the other Masechta? The answer is because Torah comes from Tikkun. And Tikkun, just like by Klal Yisrael, you can't say one Yid doesn't need another Yid. Every Yid needs another Yid pertaining to something. And so too pertaining to Torah. This is what the Mitzvah Rebbe says in one line. That in Torah also, being that Torah is Tikkun. Therefore, every Masechta is going to have a little bit of a different Masechta. Like in Tikkun Chesed has Nikvura Tiferes. Every Masechta has a little bit of another Masechta. And in order to understand fully a certain aspects of this Masechta, you're going to have to come on to another Masechta. In certain things, the other Masechta is the Reish, and this Masechta is the Regel. In certain things, this Masechta is the Reish, and the other one is the Regel. That's the way it is in Kedusha. And he starts to go on to say that even the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, which is the head, doesn't have a completion without the mitzvah of Tzedakah, which is the Regel. In certain things, that completes the head. So just this Maimer, this one line in the Maimer, really gives us a whole new understanding how even though there are Mesechtes and Shas and officially there's Chesed and Gvura, just like in Kedusha, there's Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, but nevertheless, each one really has to come onto the other and it has in it from the other. And that's what we see it in Torah. You see it in Nigla the Torah, how each thing needs to come onto another. Hatzlacha Rabbe Umuflaga.
Shukayach, thank you very much.
To you.
Shukayach everyone for joining in. I hope you have a good winter. And share to all the speakers and everyone who participated, everyone who helped arrange it. And the able to help, to have Terech Hadash Miti Teitzei, and end to all the Galos, end to all these wondering, the period. And we should see Mashiach very soon and be all together in Yerushalayim with the Beis Hamikdash. And it's Kol Tov, all the best.
Shukayach to you also for taking part and helping us to enjoy this.